Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku faced his darkest day. If you guys enjoyed this movie, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story lyzarien from 𝐴𝐿3. So let's start the video. His feet took a shaky first step, but then continued forward with determination. Through sobs and struggling to dry his face with the sleeves of his school uniform, Izuku kept telling himself that he already knew. He had known for years, but until this moment, he had clung to a tiny, fragile hope deep within him. The sky was a brilliant blue, and a gentle breeze swept around him, brushing against his skin. That day, he had met the hero he admired most. All Might had personally saved his life, and even given him an autograph, so things weren't all bad, he told himself, trying to force a smile as he edged closer to the roof's ledge. Why had he met All Might? Was it really just a coincidence, or was it fate? Perhaps it was meant to spare him more suffering, to help him forget about pursuing a path that would inevitably end in tragedy. All Might had just confirmed that his dream was just that, a dream, unrealistic and unattainable. Izuku understood what All Might had said. He really did, and he was grateful. But it had been too painful to hear. He knew he couldn't be a hero without a quirk. He had always known that, but still. As he took his final step toward the void, Deku closed his eyes, attempting to force a smile. His right foot hovered in the air, suspended in what felt like an eternity before his body began to fall headfirst into the abyss. He didn't understand why All Might had to leave so quickly just moments ago. Maybe if he had stayed a little longer, Izuku wouldn't have felt so alone. As he continued to fall, memories from his life flashed before his eyes. He remembered his mother hugging him when he was 4 years old, tearfully apologizing. He saw his 5-year-old self, stifling sobs behind the door of his room, while his parents argued in the living room, though he no longer remembered what about. Then, the image of his father, closing the door firmly behind him as his mother held him back to prevent him from following. Maybe that's why All Might's words had hurt so much. Since his father had left, All Might had filled that void in his heart, becoming the closest thing to a father figure he had ever had. Now, that idol, that hope, had crumbled in a matter of seconds. Izuku grimaced in pain, a shadow of despair settling over his face. Meanwhile, on the ground, someone else began to move, their feet pounding the pavement with force, the hurried steps echoing through the air. As they ran, they dropped their school briefcase without stopping, their only goal being to reach him in time. In Izuku's mind, the day's recent memories began to blend with the present. He saw 𝐀𝐦 pushing him to the ground, calling him useless. 𝐀𝐦 destroying his notebook and throwing it out the window without a second thought. He saw himself trapped, suffocated by that sludge monster, feeling his life slipping away. And finally, he remembered the imposing figure of All Might, with his muscular and dominating back, waving a simple farewell after jumping off the rooftop, wiping a small scratch at the corner of his lips. 𝐜𝐴𝐬. The sudden shout shattered the silence that enveloped Izuku, forcing him to open his eyes. Still falling headfirst, he saw a girl stretching out her hand with all her might, desperately trying to reach him. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion, and he noticed that 4 of her fingers were already touching his hand. With wide eyes, Izuku realized what was happening. It was in one of his hero analysis notebooks. Whatever her quirk was, it needed all 5 fingers to make contact for it to take effect. It was crazy to think about such details at a time like this, but at least it distracted him from the severity of his situation. Without thinking much, and perhaps influenced by the desperate effort on the girl's face, Izuku moved his pinky to complete the contact with all 5 fingers. He felt an immediate change, as if an invisible force surrounded him and stabilized him. Suddenly, he found himself less than 3 meters from the ground, flailing in the air until he managed to turn 180 degrees, though he had no idea what to do next. The girl was still straining, her eyes tightly shut, fingers clasped together with all her energy, until she could no longer hold on and let go. Izuku was the first to hit the ground, followed closely by the girl, who landed on top of him with a thud that left them both dazed for a moment. Rubbing her head slightly, but reacting almost immediately, the girl pulled away a little to look directly at his face. To Izuku, it seemed like she was surprised to see him up close, but shaking off that initial reaction, she looked at him with renewed concern. "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" I. Izuku tried to respond, without much success, trying to back away slightly. embarrassed by what he had attempted to do, and by the proximity of the girl's face. However, when he tried to stand up, he was overwhelmed by a sharp pain in his foot. They both noticed immediately the strange angle his right foot had taken, a result of not landing properly. Izuku turned completely pale. She covered her mouth to hold back a scream. The image of the girl who had saved him faded into darkness until he lost consciousness. Ochako Uraraka desperately tried to catch the attention of passing pedestrians as she knelt beside the unconscious green-haired boy. Her voice, though tinged with urgency, seemed to be lost in the commotion around her. The people were all moving quickly, their faces marked by concern and fear, but they were heading in the opposite direction. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice rising in pitch as she finally managed to catch the attention of a man who was hurriedly talking on his cell phone. His expression was tense. "Could you please call an ambulance from your phone?" The man barely glanced at her, clearly distracted, but his gaze softened slightly as he registered the sight of the boy sprawled on the ground. With a quick nod, he pointed down the street. "There are several ambulances already parked at the corner," he said, his voice hurried as if he were already mentally checking out of the conversation. "You should take him there." How convenient. She quickly gathered her thoughts, trying to piece together why everyone seemed to be moving in such a rush. What's happening? A boy's been caught by some kind of sludge monster. There are already a few heroes on the scene, but it looks like none of them have the right quirk to deal with it, the man explained briefly before turning and jogging toward the chaos. Ochako's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed the thought aside. "I can't worry about that right now," she reminded herself. The boy in front of her needed immediate attention, and she couldn't afford to lose focus. She reached out and gently placed her hand on the boy's shoulder, her fingers trembling slightly as she activated her quirk. The sensation of weightlessness enveloped him as his body began to lift off the ground. She carefully maneuvered him into her arms, cradling his limp form as she hurried down the street toward the cluster of ambulances. From Bakugo's point of view, there were many heroes around him, all trying to damage that disgusting mud monster that was slowly suffocating him. But they seemed so weak and incompetent. He couldn't believe those idiots dared to call themselves professional heroes. He squeezed his eyes shut, and tears he didn't want to acknowledge streamed down his face. He remembered that idiot Deku, who always seemed eager to help others, but lacked the strength to do so. Always crying, but with his fists raised. That was the kind of person who died first, uselessly. It made him furious. Pathetic. Pathetic. He wanted to scream, but could barely manage a weak rasp. "Pathetic," one of the onlookers muttered, almost as if sharing Bakugo's frustration, as he leaned against a wall, coughing up blood. "I have to." Suddenly, a hand on his shoulder caught his attention. "Help is already on the way, so don't push yourself." "It's not good for you." Tsukachi, the chief of police, tried to calm him down. Above the mud monster, 3 red dots of light appeared. Noticing this, the closest heroes quickly retreated, trying to make the crowd do the same. From the other side of the wall, 3 armored agents descended in rappel, using flamethrowers that effectively made the monster writhe in pain. Still trapped, Bakugo felt the heat from the flamethrowers, his skin beginning to sweat, but the pressure on his arms eased slightly. That's when he saw his chance. With a malicious grin, he opened his palms, sparks beginning to flare up. "No, I won't forgive you." "Never," he roared, his voice filled with pure rage. "Die," he screamed, channeling all his power into a massive explosion. "Die?" The onlookers echoed in shock. A great explosion erupted from the alley, lighting up the sky for a brief moment. Then, large chunks of mud began to fall, but the monster no longer moved. "He's really strong," the police chief acknowledged, while All Might watched in stunned silence. When Izuku opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was All Might, though, of course, it was just a figurine on the shelf in front of his bed. The iconic pose of the hero frozen in time. The familiar sight was a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in his chest, and for a brief, fleeting moment, he wondered, had it all been a dream? But as he tried to sit up, reality came crashing back. His leg was encased in a heavy cast, his eyes were swollen from crying, and an unbearable emptiness gnawed at his heart, a void that seemed impossible to fill. A painfully real memory surged to the forefront of his mind, cutting through the haze of confusion and hope. "I'm sorry. You can't be a hero without a quirk." The words echoed in his mind, sharp and unforgiving, and once again, tears welled up in his eyes, blurring the room around him. He clutched his shirt tightly over his heart, as if the physical pressure could somehow keep the emotions from spilling over. could somehow keep him from breaking apart entirely. The door to his room creaked open, and Izuku quickly wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a futile attempt to hide the evidence of his sorrow. The figure standing in the doorway was immediately familiar. The kind girl who had saved him. She was carrying a tray of food, and as their eyes briefly met, Izuku felt a flush of embarrassment rise to his cheeks. Instinctively, he lowered his gaze, unable to face her kindness in the wake of his despair. "Thank goodness, you're awake," she exclaimed with palpable relief, her voice soft and warm. She placed the tray on the bedside table, her genuine smile lighting up the room. But as her eyes lingered on Izuku, who kept his head down, not uttering a single word, her smile faltered. "Please," she began, her voice tinged with guilt as she bowed deeply in front of him, her sincerity evident in every gesture. "Forgive me for using my quirk on you. Because of me, you got hurt finally." Izuku lifted his face to look at her, still in mid-bow, his mouth slightly open as tears slowly started to spill over again. He had no idea how to respond, no idea what to say to this girl who was so earnest in her apology, so undeserving of his silence. Who was this girl? And how could she be so kind to him? When no response came, Ochako slowly looked up and saw Izuku Midoriya. His name had been mentioned by his mother, crying uncontrollably, his sorrow laid bare. "Are you in pain?" she asked, her concern deepening as she reached out, her hand hovering just above his shoulder, hesitant to touch him. "Izuku," his mother's voice suddenly called out from behind the kind girl, who quickly stepped aside to allow the older woman to rush to his side. "I was so worried when you didn't wake up," she cried, her hands frantically checking his face and arms for any sign of injury, as if she could somehow erase his pain with her touch. "Mom?" Izuku murmured softly, the word barely escaping his lips as he sought some context, some understanding of how he had ended up here. "This young lady kindly brought you home after you were treated by Recovery Girl," his mother explained, her voice trembling with gratitude as she wiped her nose with a tissue. Despite the tension in the room, she managed a small, grateful smile. "We owe this young lady a lot," she added, her voice filled with sincerity as she looked at Ochako with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. Izuku made an effort to sit up, though his movements were slow and labored. His body still ached from the ordeal, and his mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Meanwhile, Ochako Uraraka raised both her hands in front of them, a gesture meant to deflect their gratitude. "No, actually," she began, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment as both mother and son bowed their heads in appreciation. "I was just apologizing to your son for using my quirk on him without his consent. I've heard of cases where that has ended very badly. The truth is," Ochako trailed off, her words faltering as she struggled to explain her actions. For a moment, Izuku recalled what he had heard her shout before he opened his eyes while falling. Her voice desperate and urgent. He wondered if she had mistaken him for someone else, if that was the real reason she had saved him. A new pang shot through his chest, sharp and sudden like a stab wound, and he couldn't help but clutch his shirt with a fist over his heart, the pain almost too much to bear. Both women looked at him with concern, though his mother's gaze suddenly turned more serious, more intense. "When I went to the school to report your condition, some of your classmates told me that a boy named Bakugo has been bullying you for a long time," she said, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of anger. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine as he realized exactly where this conversation was heading. His mother took him by both shoulders, her grip firm but trembling as she tried to hold back her tears. Izuku couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking as she struggled to keep her composure. The silence stretched on, heavy and endless, as mother and son now stared at each other with tear-filled eyes, the unspoken words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. "It's not what you think," Izuku barely managed to say, his voice a mere whisper, his throat tight with emotion. "I want you to tell me," she urged, her grip on his shoulders tightening slightly. "Tell me if it was that Bakugo or one of his friends who pushed you off the building." Izuku covered his mouth with both hands, shocked that his mother would ask so directly, though deep down, he had seen it coming. He shook his head vigorously, his emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. Feeling a bit uncomfortable, Ochako glanced around the room, her eyes catching on the various All Might memorabilia that adorned the walls and shelves, a testament to Izuku's unwavering devotion to the hero. "By the way," she interjected, her voice breaking the tension as she remembered something important. "A few moments before I saw you fall from the building, I saw All Might running down the street, coming from that direction." That's why I turned around. What a coincidence, right? His mother's eyes narrowed, a new kind of severity settling into her gaze as she turned back to Izuku. Izuku, does this have anything to do with All Might? Izuku continued to cover his mouth, the tears once again flowing from his eyes, his silence somehow betraying him, even as he tried to keep his emotions in check. His mother frowned, her expression a mixture of frustration and concern. Don't tell me you were trying to get his autograph and tried to follow him when he jumped off the roof, his mother ventured to guess, her voice tinged with disbelief. Izuku kept his mouth covered, saying nothing, and lowered his head a little. His mother sighed, the sound heavy with resignation, before standing up. You've taken this fandom too far, Izuku. But it's over now, she scolded, her voice firm as she began gathering all the figurines and posters in the room, stuffing them into a box with a sense of finality. She turned to leave, the box held tightly in her arms. Izuku made no attempt to stop her, though his heart ached with every item she took away. She paused in the doorway, her voice softening as she turned to face him one last time. I'm doing this because I want you to realize that there's more to life than All Might. And that I'm the one who's here with you. Unable to hold back any longer, Izuku collapsed back onto the bed, his body trembling as he covered his eyes with both forearms, the tears flowing freely now. That's true. I never stopped to think about how my mom would have felt if I had died from that fall, he thought, the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks, the guilt almost too much to bear. Now alone, Ochako and Izuku remained in silence for a while, the weight of the day's events hanging heavy in the air. As I was saying before, I'm sorry, Ochako apologized again, her voice barely above a whisper. But Izuku didn't dare remove his arms from his face, too ashamed to look at her. It seems I made another mistake, she added, her voice filled with regret, though Izuku shook his head fervently, still not looking at her, unable to let her bear the blame for his own shortcomings. Well, I think it's been a long day for you. I'll let you rest for now, but I'll come back tomorrow to check on you. So, see you then, Ochako said, her voice gentle as she stood up, giving him one last look before quietly leaving the room. She closed the door behind her, the sound echoing in the silence that followed. She remained outside for a few seconds, leaning against the door as she tried to collect her thoughts. The image of a boy smiling who undeniably resembled Izuku Midoriya flashing Uraraka stood there with a distant look for a moment longer before finally pushing herself away from the door. Inside the room, Izuku continued to cover his face, feeling the tears still flowing. He tried to calm down and, staring up at the ceiling, thought that despite everything that had happened, at least he had managed to talk to a girl for the first time. He was slowly drowning in disgusting mud. No matter how much he struggled, he kept sinking deeper. Only his hand remained above the surface, desperately trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing there. Bakugo jolted awake in what was clearly a hospital room. As he turned, he saw his mother with an expression he didn't like at all. Was that pity? What kind of stupid face are you making? Cut it out. His mother approached slowly, and with a sudden change in her expression, she slapped him. Touch me again, and you'll lose that hand. I can't believe I raised you to be like this. I'm not saying I'm happy that monster almost killed you, but maybe you deserved it a little bit, eh? Another slap came, just as harsh. I said, cut it out. Is it true you've been bullying a boy in your class? Bakugo let out a small scoff. So what? He's a quirkless loser. Anticipating the third slap, Bakugo caught his mother's hand mid-air, not expecting that she would strike his nose with considerable force, using her other hand. Bakugo growled in response. Ma'am, please, the doctor intervened from behind. Maybe Bakugo isn't entirely to blame for his behavior. Do you think there could be a reason? Bakugo's mother asked, rubbing her wrist. Don't talk about me like I'm not here, damn it. Bakugo complained, still holding his nose. We ran several lab tests to ensure there was no residue of the sludge monster left in your son's body. We also discovered that his testosterone levels are excessively high. This is likely a side effect of his quirk. In a woman like you, who doesn't naturally produce this substance, it wouldn't be an issue. But in a male, it can manifest as severe mood swings with a tendency towards aggression and violence. You should test this woman too. As far as I'm concerned, she's almost a tomboy. Bakugo's mother threatened him with her fist from a distance, her action blocked by the doctor's arm. I recommend you administer this medication daily, the doctor said, handing over some boxes and syringes. You might see some improvements over time. Thanks for helping me with this. Toshinori took a big sip of coffee, briefly catching a glimpse of his sunken eyes reflected in the dark liquid. "It's nothing," the police chief replied, taking a final sip from his own cup. "I have to admit, I was also intrigued by that boy, Bakugo, after seeing how he took down that monster with a single attack. But, to be honest, what I found isn't very flattering, and I doubt you'll like it," he warned, handing him a folder. On the first page, Toshinori found a picture of the boy in question, along with general information like age, weight, and the features of his quirk. However, as he flipped through the school records, All Might quickly understood what his friend was referring to. It seems he's doing well in school, but he has some issues with his temper. Maybe with some medication and professional help. I wish that were all. It seems he's a bit of a bully, especially to one particular boy in his class. All Might flipped through the pages until he found the information the police chief was referring to. His eyes widened in shock. The young boy with green hair and freckles was unmistakable. He was the same boy he had rescued from the sludge monster, the one who had asked him if he could be a hero without a quirk. All Might deeply regretted being so harsh with him, but it was crucial that no one learned the truth about the symbol of peace. "I tried to find him to hear his side of the story," said the police chief, lighting a cigarette. To see if Bakugo is really a bully or just a teenager who doesn't know his own strength." He took a puff and offered a cigarette to All Might, who seemed more interested in hearing the rest of the story. "But I couldn't find him. The boy Bakugo was bullying, Izuku Midoriya, is on leave after falling from a building a few blocks from where Bakugo was caught by the monster." He took another puff. Apparently, Bakugo had previously told Midoriya that he should kill himself since he doesn't have a quirk, and also mocked him for wanting to join the hero course at UA. All Might stood up, surprising the police chief. His expression turned stern, and he clenched his teeth. He was angry at himself, and a bit at young Bakugo for saying something so terrible. Fortunately, things didn't get worse. A young girl who was passing by, with a quirk that counteracts gravity, managed to intervene in time. But they fell badly, and young Midoriya ended up with a fractured foot. "Do you happen to know where young Midoriya lives?" "No, but..." The police chief placed the cigarette in the corner of his mouth and began typing on his computer. "I can find out in a few minutes." "Thank you. Are you planning to visit him?" "Yes, definitely," All Might confirmed with a determined air. "I just hope it's not too late." Izuku's mother watched with great concern as her son carried a large cardboard box filled with All Might memorabilia, including the curtains from his room. It was a relief to see him up and about again, thanks to Recovery Girl's quick healing. But she had a sinking feeling that something was seriously wrong. "I'm going to drop this off at the corner. If I remember correctly, today is the day they collect this kind of stuff." Izuku made his way toward the door, but his mom stepped in his path. "You don't have to do this, Izuku," she said, blowing her nose into a handkerchief, her eyes glistening with tears. "I just wanted to teach you a small lesson, but that doesn't mean you have to throw away your things." Izuku looked at his mom with concern as well. Setting the box on the table, he gave her a hug. Maybe in the past, he would have cried in a moment like this, but he felt as if he'd run out of tears. Besides, he had decided to be stronger for his mother's sake, so she wouldn't worry so much about him. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I realized I don't need all these things if I have you. And you're right, I took this obsession too far and nearly lost my life. I shouldn't have put so much importance on one person." Izuku tried to suppress the intense feelings that had overwhelmed him. "It's like Hero Hawk said in an interview. Sometimes, in our desire to save the world, we forget those closest to us, even our families. But I promise that from now on, before I do anything, I'll think about your feelings too." Izuku, his mom, hugged him even tighter, and when she looked up at him, she was surprised to see him forcing a smile. "So, I've decided to follow a different path from All Might." His mom finally released him, somewhat surprised, and Izuku took this opportunity to head out of the house with the box. "I'll be back in a moment." Already on the street, Izuku noticed that it was another day of blue skies and a gentle breeze. He adjusted the box in one hand and observed a beautiful trail of clouds where a plane had recently passed. He followed the trail with his finger in a straight line until he returned his gaze to the street and saw a tall, very thin blonde man with sunken eyes standing in front of him. "Ah!" Izuku gasped, dropping the box to the ground and revealing its contents. The man gritted his teeth as he saw the young man bending down to pick up the All Might action figures that had fallen out, and he decided to help him. "I'm sorry," he apologized, embarrassed as he received one of the figures from the stranger's hand. "Are you going to throw this away?" the man asked, getting distracted by another of the figures and examining it closely in front of his face. Yes, Izuku admitted, though when he saw that the man was looking more into the box's contents, he smiled a little. Unless you want them. They looked each other directly in the eyes, and Izuku felt that there was something sadder in the man's gaze, beyond his physical appearance. Maybe he had some illness that made him look like that, and seeing him with the All Might figure in his hand, Izuku couldn't help but think that he was the complete opposite of the smiling hero. Is it that you no longer admire the hero All Might? I think All Might is the greatest hero of all time. I've always been a huge fan, and you know, he personally saved me from the attack of a horrible monster that tried to suffocate me. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Izuku paused before continuing and lowered his gaze slightly. But after he saved me, I realized that I could never actually become like him, no matter how hard I try. I think after my father left, I started to think of All Might as a kind of father figure, as a role model whose footsteps I could follow. But without a quirk, I now realize that's practically impossible. And I have to admit that it made me feel very sad. When he looked up again, Izuku noticed that the blonde man was crying because of his story. Please, don't feel bad for me, he hurried to offer the stranger a handkerchief. There are many other things I can do with my life. All Might kindly suggested I join the police force, and I think he might be right. Although I haven't made a final decision yet. The man stood up and looked at him with newfound determination in his eyes. Then I will help you. In Izuku's eyes, there was something heroic in those words, and the reflection of the morning light behind the man made him appear stronger than he initially seemed. The school bell rang, signaling the end of another day at Izuku's school. As he headed toward the exit, his expression was troubled, reflecting on all the changes that had recently taken place in his life. The first significant change had been the arrival of the man he met on the street, a retired personal trainer who he now knew as Toshinori Yagi. This man had visited his mother to convince her to let him train Izuku in the mornings, supposedly to strengthen both his body and mind, something he claimed was necessary no matter what path Izuku decided to take. He had also promised to introduce Izuku to the chief of police in the city, allowing him to participate in a special course to see if he might be interested in joining the police force. As he had told Mr. Yagi, Izuku wasn't sure if that was the path he wanted to take, but it was worth giving it a try. Over here, a cheerful girl called out to him from a distance near the door, causing Izuku to blush slightly under the curious stares of others. They probably noticed by her uniform that she was from another school and had come to see him. That had been the second big change in his life. The kind girl, who he now knew as Ochako Uraraka, had started coming to see him every day after school so they could walk to the station together. They always talked about interesting things like heroes or the news, and Izuku definitely wanted to keep seeing her. But deep down, part of him wondered about the real reason she continued visiting him even after he had recovered. And sometimes, that made him feel something strange, a mix of happiness and anxiety that he didn't know how to handle. A small huff from behind sent a chill down Izuku's spine. Move aside, Deku Kaken complained from behind him, only now noticing that he had stopped walking, lost in his thoughts. Sorry, Kaken. Izuku quickly moved out of the way, noticing the slight change in Kaken's expression. Lately, he seemed more serious than usual, which made him look intimidating in a way that Izuku couldn't quite define. This was definitely the biggest change in Izuku's daily life. For some reason, Kaken had stopped picking on him. Izuku wondered if it was because of the incident with the sludge monster. Unlike him, Kaken had been able to fight the monster and win. There was clearly a huge gap between the two of them. Maybe Kaken had realized that there was no point in bothering someone who was clearly not on his level. Is that the guy who used to bully you? Uraraka asked beside him. But it seems like you two get along much better now. Why do you say that, Uraraka? Izuku asked, moving away a little, as he still wasn't entirely used to her sudden closeness. I heard him say that you can do it. You know, Deku. Once again, Izuku got nervous. No. Actually, he's referring to the other way to read the kanji of my name, something like useless. It was something he said when we were learning to read. But he said it so many times that it's lost its meaning as an insult. Uraraka clasped her hands together with an almost radiant smile. Well, you should give it the meaning you want from now on. As far as I'm concerned, Deku meaning you can do it is a cute nickname. Before Izuku could react, Ochako started bouncing on her toes, raising her fist to the sky while repeatedly chanting Deku. With enthusiasm. Why, you can call me Deku if you want, Izuku agreed, feeling the warmth rising to his face, turning it red. "I will," Uraraka replied with a warm smile before starting to walk toward the exit. Izuku followed, feeling like his world was slowly beginning to change. However, suddenly, a large crowd of students gathered at the entrance, forming a human barrier that blocked any attempt to leave. The air filled with a nervous murmur, and the tension began to grow among those present, who exchanged uneasy glances. Bakugo, who was at the front, frowned in annoyance, his eyes flashing with a mix of disdain and irritation. Right in front of him, a blonde-haired boy emerged from the crowd, standing out with his haughty posture and arrogant expression. Behind him was a group of students, clearly from other schools. "So you're Katsuki Bakugo, the one everyone's talking about. I hear you're interested in entering UA next year, so I came to introduce myself since I plan to take the exam too. My name is Nido Monoma, and it's a pleasure to meet you," he said, extending his hand with an exaggerated bow. "Move," Bakugo simply replied, swatting away Monoma's hand. "Ah, of course. I had already heard, but I had to see for myself. Besides playing the victim for so long, they say you're the most arrogant of all since you defeated that third-rate villain. But just so you know, that alone won't be enough to get into a prestigious school like UA." The students near Bakugo took a step back, fear reflecting in their faces. Everyone knew that Bakugo didn't tolerate being challenged, and Monoma's audacity was almost suicidal. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if the air was charged with static electricity, anticipating an imminent explosion. Uraraka watched as Deku swallowed hard, not taking his eyes off what was about to happen. "I want you to leave and never come back. Got it?" To everyone's surprise, the strange boy began laughing extravagantly. What did you say? I couldn't hear you if you speak so softly. What happened to the energy of dye that you told that sludge villain? Because it was something like this, right?" Monoma raised his hand to the sky, and suddenly, an explosion similar to the ones Bakugo produced burst above their heads, leaving everyone speechless. Everyone except Midoriya, who started muttering to himself, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I can't believe it. Does he have the same quirk as Kaken? No, that would be too strange. If fire powers are already rare, explosive ones are even rarer. Maybe 1 in 3 million people have that quirk. But even if it were the same, that looked way too similar to the type of explosions Kaken uses, so his quirk must be to copy quirks." Monoma adjusted his hair with a drop of confusion at being caught so quickly, but he quickly recovered his arrogant demeanor. "You see, what you did wasn't really that impressive. What I think is that you like to draw attention, and that's why you played the victim for so long, waiting to be saved. But as you saw, real heroes like All Might were too busy to deal with your victim complex." Those words finally managed to anger Bakugo, who, with gritted teeth, lunged at Monoma, trying to grab him by the collar. But Monoma, with surprising agility, dodged the attack, sliding his body with a skill that caught Bakugo off guard. "And from what I see, you're also a bit slow. That's going to be bad with the new scheme in the UA entrance exam." "New?" Bakugo growled, preparing to throw a punch. Monoma, with a smile that never left his face, dodged the first punch, and then the subsequent ones, moving with an ease that only served to further irritate Bakugo. In a moment that seemed to slow down, as if time itself had stopped, Monoma managed to slip under Bakugo's outstretched arm, and, in an agile move, stuck small bunny stickers on 3 parts of Bakugo's back, causing a mix of confusion and fury in his rival. "As far as I'm concerned, I won't have to worry about you during the exams. It was all just a big media exaggeration." Monoma let out another extravagant, almost theatrical laugh, enjoying the humiliation he was inflicting. "What a loser," Monoma taunted, pointing at Bakugo. Bakugo began to spark from his palms. That's enough." A firm voice interrupted the chaos. A red-haired girl with a long ponytail bouncing behind her appeared out of nowhere, hitting Monoma on the back of the neck with enough force to make him stumble. Then, she grabbed him by the neck like a disobedient puppy. So this strange excursion to get crepes was about this. "You should be ashamed." She then gave everyone a slight bow as a sign of apology and farewell. Everyone watched as the students from other schools left, leaving them with a feeling of disbelief at how everything had ended in such a pathetic way. On the train ride back home, the rhythmic sound of the carriage accompanied the gentle sway of the journey. Uraraka, with her usual energy, leaned slightly toward Deku, getting close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She was interested in the information he was searching for on his phone. As she did so, she noticed something that caught her attention. This time, Deku didn't show his usual shyness or nervousness at their proximity. Was he finally getting used to her presence? Or was he so absorbed in what he was reading that he didn't notice? A soft smile appeared on Uraraka's lips, as she hoped it was the latter. Seeing Deku blush seemed unusual for a guy, but that very rarity was what made it incredibly adorable to her. Here it is, Deku announced. It says that the new High Principal, 𝐲𝐸 𝐍𝐸, decided, as his first change in administration, to modify the UA entrance exam, which has remained the same for over 2 decades. What happened to the previous principal? Uraraka asked, visualizing the former principal, Nezu, with his characteristic smile and the mental image of him waving. Apparently, he decided to take a break from teaching to pursue a political career. He wants to run for mayor of the city. Oh, I see, murmured Uraraka, while a funny image of Nezu with a little mayor's hat popped into her mind. Meanwhile, Deku continued scrolling through the information on his phone, his expression still serious. This is what Monoma was referring to, he said, showing Uraraka his phone, which displayed a silhouette of a human body with 3 red lights marked in different spots. The first filter for entering UA will be a competition in which the applicant must avoid being tagged on 3 sensors attached to their body while trying to tag 3 other candidates to disqualify them. This way, the new principal aims to provide fairness to applicants with quirks that are different from those based on physical strength, like psychic or intelligence-based quirks. Before, the exam consisted of fighting robots and gathering points, like in a video game, Uraraka commented, and Deku nodded in agreement. In a competition like that, Kakin wouldn't have any trouble getting in, Deku continued. But from what we saw today, agility has become something really essential. I think the ability to think quickly could also be decisive, Uraraka added with a smile, pointing at him. You impressed all of us with how fast you analyzed Monoma's quirk. Are you sure that's not your quirk? Have you ever taken any EC tests? Finally, Deku began to blush and made funny hand gestures, much to Uraraka's delight. My mom took me to a lot of tests, including intelligence ones. But it turned out I was just slightly above average, nothing worth bragging about, and certainly not something that could be classified as an EC quirk. It was still impressive, Uraraka smiled, and Deku couldn't help but cover his face with his forearms, trying to hide the growing blush he felt. Uraraka's warm words had completely disarmed him. Oh, this is my stop, Uraraka suddenly realized, getting up. See you tomorrow. Deku nodded, still somewhat hidden behind his arms, unable to look at Uraraka directly as she said goodbye with a smile. Would he ever manage to properly say goodbye to her? He wasn't sure. All Might arrived at the police chief's office with a smile. Hello, how have you been? The police chief greeted him with a firm handshake, noting the elegance of the suit All Might was wearing. Oh, right, I remember now. Starting today, you'll be beginning your training to teach at UA next year. Don't forget to send my congratulations to the new principal. Of course, I will, All Might replied as he took a seat. Gradually, his imposing figure began to shrink, revealing the thin and worn Toshinori Yagi hiding behind the facade of the symbol of peace. He let out a weary sigh. Although I must admit that I'm a bit concerned about the hero candidates for next year. It seems like Aizawa won't hesitate to disqualify any candidate he deems unworthy. The police chief nodded, his expression mixing understanding with seriousness. I recall hearing him say that there's nothing more cruel than letting a dream collapse halfway. Toshinori reflected on those words, knowing Aizawa had a point, even though he couldn't shake a certain unease. But taking someone's dream away so quickly can also be very cruel, he murmured, more to himself than to his interlocutor. The police chief noticed the comment, but decided not to delve deeper. There were more urgent matters at hand. Anyway, the reason I called you is that we need your help investigating a case. The chief handed Toshinori a folder. He waited for Toshinori to read the first page on his own before continuing. Toshinori's eyes narrowed as he absorbed the information, and his expression darkened slightly. So Endeavor's son has disappeared, he finally said, breaking the silence. In fact, we have strong reasons to believe he has fled, the police chief clarified, indicating Toshinori to turn to the next page. I can't give you all the details, but it seems that Endeavor's family has been in decline since the death of his first son, Toya. And it appears that Endeavor was putting too much pressure on his younger son to be his successor. Toshinori looked at the photo in the file, noting the burn scar that marked the young man's face. It's unlikely, but the last thing we know is that he was preparing for the UA entrance exams, especially since the recommendation system was also cancelled by the new principal. I see. Toshinori closed the folder slowly. I'll keep an eye on it. In the darkness of the night, a flash of lightning illuminated Todoroki's face as he pushed aside scrap metal to create a makeshift shelter and protect himself from the approaching storm. Of course, he had never imagined himself in such a precarious situation, but he told himself that anything was better than continuing to live in the same house with his insane father. Once he had a minimally adequate refuge for the night, he considered starting a fire to warm up, but he immediately abandoned the idea, refusing to use that power which he felt had never truly belonged to him. Or rather, that he had never wished to have. Succumbing to exhaustion, he tried to get comfortable and fell asleep almost instantly. As he slept, his dreams intertwined with childhood memories of his mother, and the moments he had wished to be a normal child, free from the burden of a legacy he had never wanted. In his dream, he walked along a dark path, alone, with the flames of his father always in sight, always lurking in the shadows. The sun was just beginning to rise on the horizon, casting a faint orange and pink glow across the sky. Still groggy, Izuku Midoriya arrived at the beach, rubbing his eyes to clear his vision as the salty air filled his lungs. The first thing he saw upon reaching the meeting point where Mr. Yagi had summoned him was the man doing pull-ups with a ball. Quite skillfully, he had to admit. "Soccer!" exclaimed Izuku as he caught the ball. "That's right, young Midoriya. Today we're playing soccer. Not to brag, but I lived in Brazil for a while." Izuku blinked, confused. "But this doesn't resemble any of the exercises we've been doing so far." "Exactly. Today we'll work on reaction speed and agility." The memory of Monoma dodging all of 𝐀𝐦's attacks came to Izuku's mind, and he thought that he would also like to learn to move with such dexterity. "All right," he agreed with determination. "That's the spirit." Immediately, he handed Izuku a pair of strange white gloves that seemed to have sensors at the fingertips, and some shoes and knee pads combined into one piece. "What is this?" Izuku asked, holding the gear with curiosity. "Just something I borrowed from the UA engineering department." "And how did you get it?" "That's a secret," Mr. Yagi replied. Izuku was already getting used to that kind of answer and began putting on the gear, feeling a bit odd at first. Sometimes he felt like Mr. Yagi was making fun of him, but in the end, thanks to his help with the morning training sessions, he had begun to notice some changes in his physical build, and that made him feel more confident in himself. "The first thing you'll do is try to hit that target out there using the ball," Toshinori pointed to a buoy in the sea quite far from the shore. "But that's impossible," protested Izuku, surprised by the distance. Without wasting any time, Toshinori took the ball from Izuku's hands and, with a single, powerful kick, struck the buoy effortlessly. It's not a matter of strength, but rather focusing the energy on a single point. As you'll notice, today we have the tide in our favor, so the balls will eventually come back. Izuku noticed a net bag filled with many balls. "And what about the beach cleaning project?" he asked, placing the ball on the sand, his mind refocusing on the task. The boy moved constantly with the flow of the water, challenging him. "Let me worry about that," Toshinori replied. Izuku nodded, taking a deep breath before launching his first kick. The ball flew toward the sea, and Izuku was surprised to see that, although he missed the boy, the ball had come close. Toshinori scratched his chin, clearly impressed. "Do these things help focus the energy?" Izuku asked, looking more interested in the gloves and shoes. "Something like that," Toshinori answered without giving more details. "I'll come back in the evening to clean the beach," Deku proposed, setting up a second ball to kick. "We'll see if you have the energy for that, young Midoriya. Remember, since it's the weekend, we'll train until noon, and this will be the lightest thing we do today." Deku's face showed slight concern at this statement. Undoubtedly, Mr. Yagi had proven to be a very strict trainer. Deciding not to worry in advance, Izuku kicked the ball again, this time with more force and precision. The ball flew straight toward the boy, until a shadow crossed the sky. "Wow!" exclaimed a young man with large red wings, intercepting the ball in mid-air and starting to do pull-ups with it. "Sorry, but when I see a ball, I can't resist. It's Hawks." As Izuku marveled, Toshinori's mind began analyzing the situation. Hawks was a hero known for his speed and agility, but also for working on dark matters related to the government and problematic heroes. Despite his youth, he had solved significant cases, almost at Endeavor's level, but something about his methods had always made Toshinori wary. As if reading his thoughts, Toshinori suddenly saw the intentions of the winged hero. "Long past," Hawks shouted, sending the ball back with incredible force aimed directly at Toshinori. who only frowned. However, it was Midoriya who stepped in front to catch the ball with both hands, creating significant friction and sending it skyward to deflect it. Phew, Midoriya sighed, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Sorry, Hawks apologized, landing on the shore in front of them. I guess I need to improve my aim for passes. Are you all right, young Midoriya? Toshinori asked, clearly concerned. Yes, these gloves and shoes are really amazing, Mr. Yagi. Whoever created them is definitely a genius. Actually, I think it's a girl. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to assume only men study engineering, but yes, I understand. It's like the hero profession, which initially had few women. That's what I thought too. Hawks cleared his throat, noticing they had ignored him. Sorry to interrupt such a pleasant chat, but I'd like to ask if you've seen anything or anyone unusual around here. Izuku stepped forward, always willing to help. We always come here to train in the mornings, but so far we haven't seen anyone suspicious around. If we see anything, we'll report it immediately to the police. Hawks nodded, but his gaze shifted to Toshinori, coming so close that Izuku felt a certain tension in the air. And what about you, Mr. Yagi? Hawks asked, his voice low and laden with insinuation. Toshinori looked at him coldly, his brow furrowed. I haven't seen anything. Really? Because you seem a bit suspicious to me. Worried about the growing tension, Izuku tried to intervene. Mr. Toshinori is a good man. But Toshinori gently stopped him, raising a hand. Don't worry, young Midoriya. I'm used to being judged by my appearance. I'd be suspicious of myself if I saw me on the street. So I think it's best to have a little chat with Hero Hawks to dispel any doubts. Hawks smiled, though his eyes remained calculating. Please don't take me as prejudiced, Midoriya, he said, his tone softer. It'll just be a brief chat to rule out any details this kind man might have to tell me, and you'll have Mr. Yagi back. Izuku nodded, though he couldn't help but feel worried. All right. Wanting to ease his pupil's worry, Toshinori gave him one last instruction before leaving with Hawks. Keep doing this training until you've done it 100 times, and then do 100 pull-ups in a row without dropping the ball. 100 pull-ups? Izuku exclaimed, shocked. But this is my first time playing with a soccer ball. Toshinori approached and placed a comforting hand on Izuku's head, a warm smile on his face. I know you can do it. Izuku wasn't sure what caused it, but for a brief moment, a nearly mystical connection seemed to bond him with Mr. Yagi. Something warm and bright, as if they shared a silent understanding. And Toshinori seemed to notice as well, because he gave a smile that Midoriya thought was quite pleasant and tried to return it as best as he could. I'm glad to see you smile again, young Midoriya, Toshinori thought, very pleased. Let's go, Mr. Yagi, Hawks interrupted, walking toward the beach exit and turning his back on them. The sooner we leave, the sooner we'll return. Toshinori quickened his pace to catch up with Hawks, and Midoriya watched them walk away from the beach. Without realizing it, he touched his hair where it had been flattened and soon returned to his training. Katsuki Bakugo, with his usual scowl, recoiled from his mother, Mitsuki, who held a syringe in her hand. I don't like this, Katsuki growled, keeping his eyes fixed on the injection his mother was trying to administer. I think this stuff is just doping me up, making my explosions less powerful and slowing my reactions down. Mitsuki, with her characteristic disdain, rolled her eyes at her son's complaint. Well, maybe if you trained more, you could fix that. Without further warning, Mitsuki grabbed Katsuki's arm with surprising speed and injected the liquid in one swift motion. Katsuki barely had time to react, his disbelief reflected in his eyes. Do you see now? He exclaimed, frustrated, as he roughly pulled his arm away. If an old lady like you could catch me so easily, I don't know what will happen during the UA entrance exam. Mitsuki, far from being offended by her son's insult, offered a mocking smile and reached out to ruffle his hair, something she knew irritated him deeply. Katsuki flinched, stifling a growl as his mother looked at him sternly. I'll tell you this one more time. Train for this and stop being so arrogant already. Her words came out with firmness, each syllable emphasized to ensure the message penetrated her son's stubborn mind. Katsuki glared at her with fury but said nothing. His eyes burned with frustration, but deep down, he knew there was some truth to what his mother said. With a disdainful grunt, he turned and left the room, leaving a palpable tension in the air. Mitsuki watched him leave, her expression hardened, but her eyes showing a mix of concern and determination. She stood there, motionless, for a moment before feeling a presence behind her. Her husband, Masaru, was sitting at the table, watching her with a calm but inquisitive expression. "Don't you think you're being a bit harsh on him?" Masaru asked in a soft tone, with no trace of reproach, only genuine concern. Mitsuki sighed, letting her shoulders slump as she walked over to the window. The afternoon sun illuminated the branches of a nearby tree, its leaves moving gently with the breeze. "I pampered him for a long time because I liked getting praise for his quirk," Mitsuki responded, her voice softer now, almost melancholic. "But that only turned him into a boastful fool. From now on, he'll have to work harder. He needs to realize that if he doesn't, he could become a burden to someone else." Masaru watched his wife, understanding the concern driving her to be so tough. He knew that Mitsuki, though strict and sometimes severe, only wanted what was best for their son. She didn't want Katsuki to fall into the trap of self-satisfaction, especially with the uncertain future ahead. "He's strong, Mitsuki. But he needs to learn that not everything can be achieved with sheer brute strength," Masaru said, trying to calm his wife's fears. Mitsuki nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on the tree outside the window. The branches continued to sway gently, reflecting the wind that was beginning to pick up. She knew Masaru was right, but she also knew that Katsuki had to learn that lesson for himself, and only then could he truly blossom as a hero. Inside the small cafe, the atmosphere was charged with tension despite the seemingly calm surroundings. Toshinori, with his serious and stern demeanor, faced the young hero Hawks, whose relaxed and carefree attitude contrasted with the gravity of the matter at hand. "Let's get to the point," Toshinori said, maintaining his serious expression. "If this is about Endeavor's son—" "Oh, no," Hawks quickly shook his head, his mischievous smile barely visible. "We're certainly concerned about the disappearance of young Todoroki, and we think we'll be able to locate him soon and return him to his loving father. But that's not why I dared to interrupt your training with young Midoriya." With a smooth motion, Hawks pulled a photograph from his pocket and handed it to Toshinori. Upon seeing it, Toshinori's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, his mask of serenity cracked. "Tamura Shigaraki, the heir of All for One?" "Yes," Hawks confirmed, his tone now more serious. "He was last seen during the incident with a newly opened bridge that collapsed. Upon analysis, there were no structural failures, so we believe he was the one who damaged the bridge using his quirk." Hawks handed over a second photo. It showed a mysterious man with a mask covering his mouth and nose. "We believe his target was this man, the new mob boss, Kai Chisaki, who was crossing the bridge in his car at the time. A clash among criminals. That's what we'd like to know," Hawks admitted. "If the motive for the attack were clearer, it would be easier to predict their next move. And that's why I'm asking you." Hawks's demeanor had turned unusually serious. "When you fought All for One last time, was there anything that indicated he was leaving any unfinished business for his successor?" "No," Toshinori replied firmly. "When I defeated All for One for good, Tamura Shigaraki had already completely severed ties with him. He probably realized he was just being used and left without looking back. We destroyed all the nomas that were being concealed and seized all of Dr. Kyudai Garaki's research, which was also put in custody. But I suppose you already know that." "I feared you'd say that. So we're back to square one," Hawks admitted, relaxing his expression a bit. "And how are you faring after that fight, if it's not too much to ask?" A deep sigh escaped Toshinori, as if the memories of that battle still weighed heavily on his chest. "I can now only operate as a hero for 15 minutes a day, so it has become a matter of showing up and disappearing. Still, you surpassed Endeavor and me once again in this year's popularity rankings. And while it's not like anyone really pays attention to those details, don't you think it's time for you to retire?" Toshinori shifted his gaze to the nearby window, his eyes settling on an empty nest in a tree, the bare branches swaying gently with the breeze. Hawks followed his gaze, understanding the symbolism without needing words. "Ah, yes. I see. You're still in the process of finding a worthy successor to be the new symbol of peace before you can retire." Hawks took a sip from his coffee cup, trying to hide a smile. "Could it be young Midoriya?" Toshinori stood up, intending to leave, having caught a hint of mockery in Hawks's question. "I believe I've answered all questions concerning the case." "Certainly," Hawks acknowledged without intending to stop him. "But if you remember anything else, feel free to call me anytime. It would be a great honor." Hawks handed over a card with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Toshinori took it and tucked it into his pocket without looking at it, nodding briefly before turning towards the door. A moment after Toshinori closed the private room door, Hawks allowed himself to stretch in his chair, his legs relaxing under the table. With his gaze fixed on the ceiling, he recalled the green-haired, freckled boy he had seen training with Toshinori on the beach. So he might be the next symbol of peace, he chuckled softly to himself. What an interesting choice. Toshinori Yagi walked along the sidewalk heading back to the beach, still irritated by his interaction with Hawks. As his mind continued to churn with these thoughts, a voice abruptly pulled him out of his musings. "Excuse me," Toshinori stopped and turned toward the source of the voice. In front of him stood a young woman with pink hair and unusual eyes, watching him with a smile that was both wide and disconcerting. "Yes?" he responded, trying to hide his surprise. "My name is Mei Hatsume, and it's a pleasure to meet you." The girl introduced herself with overflowing energy. "Hi," Toshinori stammered, taken aback by her sudden appearance and the familiarity of that name, though he couldn't recall where he had heard it before. The girl's smile remained fixed as her eyes scrutinized him with a mix of curiosity and excitement. While as All Might he was used to receiving this kind of attention, in his current form, people usually avoided him. Suddenly, a troubling thought crossed his mind. Was she one of those young women who lured unsuspecting men into bars only to make them spend large sums of money? "Sorry, I need to get back to the beach now. Someone is waiting for me." He tried to excuse himself, resuming his walk. "Don't worry, the young man on the beach is fine. I've been keeping a very close eye on him since you left," Hatsume replied, causing Toshinori to come to a complete stop. "As for me, I'm an aspiring engineering student at UA. Are really?" Toshinori asked, now more concerned than intrigued. "Yes. Under the new admission system, they said we had 10 months to submit a project that would be judged based on its merits. But I got ahead of myself and submitted my project early. And what's wrong with being enthusiastic and wanting to catch the investor's attention from the start?" Hatsume let out a cheerful laugh, while Toshinori looked at her with a mix of amazement and worry. "Of course, I always make sure to equip each and every one of my babies with a satellite tracker," she said proudly, showing him a device that resembled a radar. "Just to make sure they don't end up in the wrong hands. Sometimes, I also install small microphones and cameras." Toshinori ventured, with a growing sense of alarm. No cameras. Because I don't need them," she pointed to her eyes. "You see, my quirk allows me to see things from a great distance, so I can monitor each of my babies myself." "Babies?" Toshinori asked, not entirely understanding. "Right now, I see Midoriya still trying to complete the 100 shots I assigned him before leaving." Hatsume smiled with a dreamy air. "I could use an assistant who is as docile as he is, and who helps me test my inventions. My current assistant is always scolding me about everything, like asking if I followed all the safety standards or things like that. But young Midoriya is very busy," Toshinori tried to argue, seeking to protect him. "What a pity," Hatsume replied, turning quickly. "But you know what's funny? Earlier, on this very beach, I saw the #1 hero, All Might, swimming. I wouldn't mind if he gave me his opinion on my babies. Do you think he's still around? Do you think Midoriya saw him? It would be worth asking, wouldn't it?" Toshinori let out a long sigh, resigned to the clear blackmail from the girl. "Please forgive me, young Midoriya," Toshinori thought as he braced himself for what was clearly going to be a long conversation with the ingenious and determined Mei Hatsume. The daylight was beginning to fade, casting the beach in a soft twilight. Izuku, absorbed in his training, barely noticed how much time had passed. Mr. Yagi had sent him a message saying he was running late due to some complications, but was on his way. Nevertheless, Izuku, determined not to waste time, continued with his routine. Izuku was focused on meeting his pull-up goal, an exercise that had challenged him more than he expected. So far, he had managed to do 20 in a row, a number that, while respectable, was far from his final goal. He knew it was all about building muscle memory, so he just had to keep a good pace and not get discouraged. "You can do it," he remembered Mr. Yagi's words. Suddenly, he felt an urge to kick the ball near his feet, sending it toward a pile of scrap. Without thinking too much, he followed the ball until it disappeared between 2 rusted containers. But when he went to retrieve it, his heart stopped at the sight of a hand weakly sticking out from between the containers. "Ah!" Izuku shouted, instinctively stepping back before concern and bravery took control of his body. As he moved the containers apart, he saw a boy with a huge red scar on his left eye, barely conscious and breathing heavily. "Hey, are you okay?" Izuku tried to get him to react by shaking him by the shoulders. "Don't worry. I'll call an ambulance right away. As he pulled out his phone, the boy swatted his hand away to stop him. Don't call anyone and leave. But, didn't you hear me? Leave. Before Izuku could react, ice spikes began to emerge from the ground around him, forming a cold and dangerous barrier. The boy lost consciousness again, leaving Izuku alone amidst the frozen threat. Izuku's heart raced, but his determination was even stronger. Ignoring the boy's words and the implicit warning in the ice spikes, Midoriya pushed through the ice, using his strength to break the barriers separating him from the boy. With careful movements, he managed to position him as best as he could on his back. With determined steps, Izuku began to walk towards the exit of the beach, his thoughts focused on getting the boy to safety. Despite the weight on his back and the uncertainty surrounding him, there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't abandon him. In a room decorated with a peculiar taste, the laptop rested on a bed covered with Cabbage Patch dolls, their vacant eyes continuously watching the scene replay on the screen. The video showed over and over again the moment Katsuki Bakugo was captured by the sludge monster. The look of suffering on the boy's face, his eyes brimming with tears, seemed to fascinate the viewer, who couldn't help but rewind the video to the beginning time and time again. Katsuki Bakugo, you're so cute, Himiko Toga whispered. Her face flushed as she smiled innocently, though her eyes shone with a disturbing intensity. I can't wait to learn more about you. As her obsession deepened, a light knock on the door pulled her out of her reverie. Knock, knock. Twice peeked his head through the door, his usual mask partially covering his face. In a quick movement, Toga closed the laptop and hugged the pillow she had been using as support. Jin, you're supposed to knock and wait for a response before coming in. The man closed the door and knocked again. Himiko didn't answer, and she watched the shadow under the door moving back and forth. That made her smile a little. Twice continued pacing back and forth when he saw Toga leave the room. Sorry. I heard you talking to yourself and thought you might be going a bit crazy. I just thought you might want some company. I'm not going crazy, Jin, Toga said, sitting on the worn-out sofa in the living room. I was just thinking out loud, and you know I don't like you spying on me. Yeah, I know, so please don't be mad at me, Twice pleaded with a tear appearing in his mask. I'm not mad, just excited. Excited? Twice repeated, tilting his head with curiosity. I'm going to confess to the boy I like, Toga said, her cheeks reddening even more as a mischievous smile spread across her face. That's great, Twice exclaimed with enthusiasm as he began rummaging through the drawers, throwing clothes everywhere. We need to decide what you're going to wear. It's very important, though, if I'm the lucky one. You don't have to wear anything, Twice added playfully, only to receive a light smack, which echoed like part of a comedic routine. You know I'm grateful for you letting me stay at your place. But that doesn't mean I'm going to take my clothes off, Toga said, as she stepped over the clothes strewn on the floor towards the exit. Twice, in his typical exaggerated style, knelt at her feet, pleading. No, please don't go. I swear I'll change. I'm not leaving. I'm just going out to find what I'll wear the day I confess, Toga said with a shy smile. You're right, it's something very important. When he opened his eyes, the first thing Todoroki saw was the concerned face of the boy from earlier. Startled, he sat up in bed, letting a wet cloth fall from his forehead. He held his head, still feeling quite dizzy, and couldn't help but lie back down. Please don't get up. You still have a bit of a fever, Midoriya said, placing the wet cloth back on Todoroki's forehead. Are we in the hospital? Todoroki asked, scanning the room with his eyes. No, at my house. Then I guess you're somewhat minimalist. Midoriya smiled a bit, embarrassed. A lot happened, and I got rid of most of the decorations. I see. Todoroki closed his eyes again. Does anyone else know I'm here? No. Midoriya got up and walked toward the door. So for now, try to rest. Seeing no response, Izuku left the room, but before closing the door, he heard Todoroki speak again. Make sure no one finds out I'm here. Izuku responded with a small sound of acknowledgement. As he took his phone out of his pocket, Izuku noticed several new messages from Mr. Yagi. And to his surprise, a call was coming in silently at that very moment. On impulse, he dismissed the call, regretting it instantly. Without allowing him to relax, the sound of keys in the front door of the house was heard, and Izuku hurried to catch his mom. Izuku. She greeted him with a smile, closing the door behind her. I'm so glad you're home. Then she seemed to remember something and raised her shopping bag. Tonight we'll have curry rice. That's great, Mom. Izuku attempted a smile, but couldn't hide his concern. What's wrong? Nothing, he hurriedly said before making a decision. I just invited a friend over. Really? A friend? His mother asked, looking around. Yes, it's just that he wasn't feeling very well and is resting in my room. Shouldn't we call his parents? They're not in the city, and where they are, there's no coverage. Izuku lied quickly. That sounds very suspicious, Izuku. He nervously laughed. But I'm glad you're bringing a friend home. This is the first time. Again, nervous laughter. Just don't ask him too many questions. He's a very private guy, and we wouldn't want him to feel uncomfortable. His mother nodded and headed to the kitchen. I'll do my best to make a good impression on your friend. His mother raised a fist with determination. Thanks, Mom. Izuku sighed with some relief, telling himself that lying just wasn't for him. Izuku's mother was fascinated by the young man, who was undoubtedly quite handsome, and judging by the look on her face, she wasn't even remotely thinking that it was all a ruse. So, tell me, Todoroki, have you known each other for a long time? She served a rather large portion of curry rice. We met recently, Todoroki replied seriously. Though after the first bite, he seemed more enthusiastic about continuing to eat. It's delicious, he smiled with a slight grin. Izuku's mother remained on cloud nine as she served a portion to her son. Mom, I'd like to invite Todoroki to stay the night, Izuku announced with a determination that contrasted with his usual shyness. Of course, he can stay as long as he wants. Todoroki put down his spoon and his expression turned slightly sad. I wouldn't want to be a bother. You're not a bother at all, both mother and son said, smiling at each other. As they shared this conversation, Todoroki felt a moment of nostalgia. A vague memory of his mother carrying him and laughing came to mind. Was it a real memory? Or just a fantasy of how he wished things had been? Someone knocking on the front door pulled him out of his thoughts, and he became alert. Young Midoriya, why don't you answer the phone when it rings? Toshinori exclaimed, entering the dining room. Ah, I completely forgot to return the call. I'm sorry, Izuku apologized, feeling quite embarrassed. A friend came to visit me at home, and I completely forgot. Toshinori couldn't help but show an initial look of surprise upon seeing Todoroki seated at the table, and it seemed like Todoroki noticed it too. Midoriya looked at both of them and wondered if Mr. Toshinori knew anything about Todoroki. So, what happened next? Uraraka asked, sitting on the train home with her phone pressed to her cheek. Izuku used his hands free to finish cleaning the classroom, as it was his turn that day. Well, after dinner, Mr. Yagi took Todoroki and me outside under the excuse of continuing the beach cleaning project. It turns out that Todoroki ran away from home, and his father had been looking for him. How did Mr. Yagi know that? Being friends with the chief of police, he can find out about those kinds of things. So, did Todoroki go back home? Mr. Yagi promised to give Todoroki a few days to think about what he wants to do, including applying for emancipation if he wishes. Meanwhile, he'll stay at my house. Poor Todoroki. His father must have pressured him too much if he's considering that. Yeah, Midoriya agreed, a hint of sadness in his voice as he leaned back against one of the desks, thinking for the first time that having a father also sounded complicated. Did his father leave because he didn't have a quirk? Or was it for some other reason? Are you still there? Uraraka called out, still on the line. Izuku blinked, shaking himself out of his thoughts. Oh, yeah. Sorry, he said quickly, trying to sound more upbeat. By the way, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Yagi. He told me you could join us tomorrow to meet a girl who's an aspiring engineer at UA. She invented some gloves and shoes that have really helped me in my training. Really? Sounds interesting. So it's a date then? A D-date? Oh, this is my stop. I'll see you tomorrow. Then Uraraka hung up abruptly. A date? Izuku repeated, left alone in the classroom. Izuku continued to fidget with his fingers as he descended the stairs from the second floor of the school, heading toward the exit. A date? No. Uraraka definitely didn't mean it in the romantic sense. Besides, he had already told her that Mr. Yagi would be accompanying them, so it was clear that by date, she meant it was a given they'd meet tomorrow. Then again, this would be the first time they'd see each other on a weekend. Izuku blushed slightly. Would it be a good idea to bring some extra money in case Uraraka wanted to go to a cafe after meeting the aspiring engineer? Should he ask his mom what to wear? Many thoughts swirled in his mind, and he nearly tripped on the last step leading to the lockers, having to step back to avoid falling. I like you. Izuku quickly covered his mouth with both hands. It seemed a girl was confessing her feelings to someone by the lockers. I like you a lot, Bakugo. Midoriya pressed both hands firmly over his mouth to avoid making even the slightest noise. But his mind was screaming, "Kaken? Huh? Who are you talking to?" Bakugo asked, confused. In front of Bakugo stood a girl bowing, holding out a letter with her arms fully extended. "I've been watching you, and I think you're a really deep guy. I can see it in your eyes." Bakugo glanced at his reflection in his locker mirror and saw only a tired version of himself, exhausted from dealing with this nonsense. "Listen, I'm not the right person for you," he replied, his tone dry and uninterested. The girl made a sound indicating she was about to cry. "Are you saying that because you like someone else?" she asked, her voice trembling. Seeing her pathetic expression in anticipation, he imagined his mother smacking him on the head. He knew that was the answer she wanted to justify his rejection. "Yeah, sure, why not?" he said carelessly. "I understand." The girl's eyes welled up even more, and she ran away crying. "What the hell is going on with these extras?" Bakugo grumbled, grabbing his backpack. "Kaken, that wasn't right. You made her cry," Midoriya exclaimed, stepping forward. Both Bakugo and Izuku stared at each other in surprise for a moment. Bakugo was the first to react. "What the hell? Mind your own business. Didn't anyone teach you not to eavesdrop on other people's conversations?" For some reason, Midoriya's expression was one of cheerful relief. "Kaken. Huh? Why are you smiling? Are you mocking me?" Bakugo growled. Deku shook his head. "Ever since the incident with the sludge monster, I noticed your attitude had changed a bit, and I started to think you might have gotten sick, or were suffering from some sort of trauma," Deku explained, lowering his voice considerably with the next sentence. "I also started to think that maybe you had stopped picking on me because you realized the gap between us had widened, and that I was no longer at your level." Bakugo stared at him for a long time, his face completely serious. Deku feared he was looking at him with pity. "Damn it. 2 confessions in a row. Just what I needed. All I want is to go home and take a shower." Bakugo slammed his locker shut and stormed off toward the exit. Deku stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock, as if he'd just realized he'd accidentally confessed his feelings to Kaken. "Ha ha ha." Uraraka laughed heartily. "So, what did you do next?" "I didn't think it was that funny," Deku replied, a bit embarrassed. I'm sorry. But it's true that there's a certain tension between you two that could easily be misunderstood," Uraraka continued laughing. Behind them walked Toshinori, who watched the sweet interaction between the young pair, thinking they certainly made a lovely couple. Suddenly, he noticed 3 particular details. The hair, the chubby cheeks, and the eyes of the young woman were very similar to those of young Midoriya's mother. Very obvious, he thought. He had to clench his teeth and cover his mouth slightly to avoid laughing. "You too, Mr. Yagi," Midoriya complained, noticing. "No, it's just that I remembered a joke," Toshinori replied. The 3 of them looked at each other and, finally, couldn't hold back and burst into laughter. "By the way, what kind of place are we going to, sir?" Uraraka asked, finally stopping her laughter. "It's a small mechanical workshop." Uraraka let out a sigh of relief. "For a moment, I thought I had worn the wrong outfit, seeing as you two are wearing suits." Deku and Mr. Toshinori exchanged glances. "I tend to dress like this most of the time," Mr. Yagi answered nonchalantly. "Do you usually dress like that too, Deku?" Uraraka asked, looking him up and down in his formal red suit and black shirt, which contrasted nicely with his green hair and eyes. "By the way, you look very handsome." Thank you," he stammered, turning red, matching his suit. "Why, you look very nice too." Uraraka looked down at herself. She was wearing high-waisted denim shorts and a simple white blouse. Her outfit was nothing special, but she smiled at Deku's kindness. He was so sweet. As if Deku had read her thoughts, he smiled at her in a warm way she had never seen before. Uraraka had to blink twice to make sure it was the same Deku she knew, who was often on the verge of tears or embarrassed about something. However, that lovely smile disappeared with a sudden explosion that sent Deku flying to the ground. "I'm done with you, Hatsune. I quit," shouted a boy with black hair and glasses, storming out of the workshop, followed by a plume of smoke. As the smoke cleared a little, the first thing Toshinori and Uraraka saw was a girl with pink hair, her chest at the level of Midoriya's nose, who was doing her best to look as far away from his nose as possible and not move an inch. "And why would I need a whiny assistant when I already have the one I want?" she exclaimed, looking down at Midoriya, who was still pinned under her chest. faced with the bizarre sight of someone as innocent as Izuku in such a suggestive position. Neither Uraraka nor Toshinori knew what to say. "Please forgive me, young Midoriya. This happened because of my carelessness," Toshinori silently apologized. Inside the workshop, Izuku was still shaken by what had happened. Uraraka seemed to be processing it, and Mr. Toshinori was clearing his throat. "Well, as you can see, this is where the magic happens," 𝐻𝐡𝐚 announced enthusiastically, spreading her arms to showcase her workshop. The place was filled to the ceiling with gadgets, tools, and cables hanging from the walls. "But of course, I hope to have much more space for my babies when I study at UA." "Sorry, did you say babies? Are you referring to your pets or Uraraka asked, her curiosity overcoming her confusion. However, before she could get a clear answer, she felt 𝐻𝐡𝐚 very close behind her, invading her personal space. "And what do we have here?" 𝐻𝐻𝐚 asked, examining Uraraka with an intensity that made the girl shiver. Mr. Toshinori, anticipating 𝐻𝐻𝐚's next move, had the prudence to cover both Midoriya's eyes and his own, anticipating what might happen next. Stop, you're tickling me," 𝐻𝐻𝐚 both of them could hear, and they quickly turned their backs, very much like two gentlemen. "All right," 𝐻𝐻𝐚 concluded, releasing Uraraka after a moment. "I have an idea of your measurements. And what's your quirk?" "I can nullify the effects of gravity on objects that." "It's too complicated to work with gravity." "Pass," she said, dodging her before Uraraka could finish. "Let's move on to the next one." Seeing 𝐻𝐻𝐚's intentions, Uraraka positioned her entire body between her and Deku, who was still turned around and defenseless. "Wait. You're going to mess him up," she said, murmuring under her breath, "in more ways than one." "All right. And what's your quirk, new assistant?" "Mr. Toshinori gave Deku a small nudge. "I don't have a quirk." Deku turned around with a very serious expression. Uraraka noticed this, and was about to say something, but she was interrupted. "What?" 𝐻𝐻𝐚 exclaimed with a shout of excitement. "The jackpot, huh?" Izuku blinked, not understanding what she meant. "Of course. You're a blank slate on which countless things can be written. It's such a hassle to adapt my babies during their development stage to a quirk, and then have to modify them for another one for their presentation." Without waiting for a response, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 grabbed Izuku by the hand and began pulling him to the back of the workshop. "Come with me, blank slate, and I promise I'll make you shine brighter than anyone." "Oh, okay. But I'm not sure I like being called a blank slate," Deku pointed out, as he was pulled out of Uraraka's and Toshinori's sight. "I could also call you Quirk Virgin, if you prefer," 𝐻𝐻𝐚 suggested. "That's 1,000 times worse." Izuku blushed intensely. "I think I'd prefer blank slate. Or my name." "Stop babbling, blank slate. You're starting to sound like my old assistant," 𝐻𝐻𝐚 said with a tone of impatience, though she maintained her good humor. "Sorry." Izuku apologized quickly. "That's more like it." Izuku turned even redder as he helped her remove his suit jacket, feeling strangely exposed amidst all the gadgets and the bustle of the workshop. Out of the corner of his eye, Toshinori could see young Uraraka looking somewhat worried about what was happening between young Midoriya and 𝐻𝐻𝐚, and he couldn't help but smile a little. How enviable those feelings of youth were. Meanwhile, at the back of the workshop, 𝐻𝐻𝐚 began to talk rapidly about her inventions, her ideas flowing like an uncontrollable torrent. Izuku listened intently, though he was a little overwhelmed by her enthusiasm. "Ah, what a relief. Finally some fresh air." Uraraka stretched her arms towards the sky, happy to finally be out of 𝐻𝐻𝐚's workshop. "Sorry if it didn't turn out like we thought," Toshinori apologized, scratching the back of his neck with an awkward smile. "I never imagined that this girl, 𝐻𝐻𝐚, would be so intense." Both Deku and Uraraka kindly shook their heads. "In the end, it was kind of fun," Uraraka said, though not very convincingly. Her thoughts were still on 𝐻𝐻𝐚's unconventional ways of evaluating people. "Yeah, plus, she didn't mind that I didn't have a quirk," Midoriya added, looking at his hands with a small smile on his face. "And maybe 𝐻𝐻𝐚 is right about me being a blank slate for possibilities." "I'm glad you think that, young Midoriya." Mr. Yagi gently touched his shoulder. "You are the only one who should choose your path. And don't let anyone limit your possibilities. Not even me. Do you understand?" "Yes." Uraraka watched them with tenderness. They really were like father and son. "So, what should we do now?" she dared to ask. "I have to take care of some things," Toshinori replied, glancing at his watch absent-mindedly. "But you two should take the opportunity to go for a walk. There's a plaza nearby," he suggested, pointing in the right direction. I could definitely use a strawberry milkshake. What about you, Deku? Sure, Midoriya agreed. Alright, then I'll see you later tonight for the beach cleanup and other exercises. Toshinori said his goodbyes. Nice to meet you, young lady. I'll ask Todoroki if he wants to join us. Midoriya called out, catching a glimpse of the man waving his hand as he continued to walk away. That seemed strangely familiar to Deku. Shall we? Uraraka asked, pulling him by the hand, which, of course, made him very nervous. But he tried to keep his composure. Why, yeah. They visited stalls, clothing stores, window shopped, and even entered a pet store, where they happened to run into the heroine Mirko, taking the chance to snap a selfie with the bunnies. Near the end, Deku bought a soccer ball. They talked about interesting things and enjoyed each other's company the whole time, until they arrived at a lovely cafe with a view of the main fountain in the plaza, where they decided to go in. So, like 𝐻𝐡𝐢𝐬, you also want to enter UA? Deku asked excitedly. Yes, Uraraka admitted, trying to shake off the discomfort she felt as she recognized it, rubbing her neck. But in the hero course. That's amazing. Yeah, but I'm still not sure if I can make it. What are you talking about? Your quirk would definitely be super useful for being a hero. Your name could even be 𝗬𝗲𝗎. Hey, I like that. Uraraka said with a playful grin, though her expression soon turned a bit somber again. But it has nothing to do with my quirk or my name. Deku waited patiently for Uraraka to continue. While the tuition and fees are relatively affordable for anyone wanting to attend UA, my family isn't doing well right now. The statement surprised Deku. He had always thought things were going well in Uraraka's life, since she always smiled and seemed so optimistic. My dad has a small construction business, and things had been going well until recently, when one of his bridges collapsed. Deku covered his mouth in shock. While the police investigated and found no structural faults, the process took long enough for my dad to lose most of his clients. Was anyone hurt? Uraraka shook her head. Since the bridge had just been inaugurated, I asked my dad to take me to see it after school and after his work. And since it was so late, only one car was passing by at that moment. Fortunately, when it happened, I managed to make the car float and put it safely aside. A clear image of the event came to her mind. Inside were a man with a funny mask and his little daughter, who seemed very scared. I'm glad no one was hurt, Deku said, relieved. They were lucky you were there to save them, just like me. Once again, Deku's sweet smile appeared, and Uraraka couldn't help but blush slightly, fanning her face to try to cool her flushed cheeks. The point is, my greatest wish was to become a hero to someday lighten my parents' financial burdens. But now it would be hypocritical of me not to worry about being a burden to them until I can work professionally. I see. This made Deku think deeply. He couldn't help but remember his mother's worried face the day he had tried to end his life. He must have been the biggest fool and most selfish of all, he thought, pressing his fists on his lap. Uraraka noticed the change in his expression and tried to cheer him up. But I didn't tell you this to make you feel bad for me, she tried to laugh, though it sounded a bit awkward. No, I don't feel sorry for you. I promise. Deku hastened to clarify. It's just that I was thinking that I should be more like you. The day we met, I didn't think things through. I only thought of myself, and I didn't stop to consider the consequences and how my mom might feel afterward. Uraraka smiled in response. Well, you know what Hawk says, sometimes, in trying to save the world, we forget those closest to us. Oh, I said the same thing to my mom the other day, Deku replied, surprised by the coincidence. Really? And you know what? Training on the beach with Mr. Yagi, I got the chance to meet him. Really? Uraraka was excited. Even though he's only 24, Hawks is already on the heels of Best Jeanist, an endeavor, she said, seeing Deku nod in admiration of his achievements. But it's true that he was ranked first last year as having the most charming smile. Above all might? Deku asked, incredulous. They both laughed at how ridiculous that sounded, and in the midst of their laughter, Uraraka stopped to look at Deku's sweet smile again. It was so sincere, so pure. But it's not like I have a crush on Hawks, or anything, Uraraka tried to clarify, waving her arms in front of her, as if to shield herself a little. You're blushing, Uraraka. They both burst into laughter again. At that moment, as the sunlight reflected off the water in the fountain, and the hustle and bustle of the plaza continued around them, they felt like they were in their own little world, simply enjoying being together. After leaving the cafe, Izuku and Uraraka found themselves walking through the plaza again, enjoying the soft glow of the sun beginning to set on the horizon. The breeze was cool and pleasant, and the lights from the fountain danced on the water. They both walked in silence, savoring the tranquility of the moment. "Uraraka, do you think you could wait here for just a moment?" Deku suddenly asked, stopping right in front of the fountain. "I remembered I wanted to buy something." "Huh?" "Sure," Uraraka replied, a bit puzzled that Deku didn't ask her to go with him. She wondered if it was something he preferred to do alone, some sort of guy thing she wasn't supposed to know about. Deciding not to overthink it, she nodded with a smile. Deku smiled back, grateful, and walked away with the soccer ball bag hanging from his shoulder. Uraraka watched him as he headed towards one of the stores on the other side of the plaza, his steps light, and his green hair swaying gently with the breeze. Taking advantage of the moment of solitude, Uraraka sat on the edge of the fountain, feeling the cool mist of the water lightly splashing on her face. She took her phone out of her pocket and unlocked it, searching for the photo they had taken with Mirko earlier. She smiled when she saw the picture. There they were, the three of them posing with the bunnies, Mirko with her energetic grin, and she and Deku smiling with that youthful joy that seemed to light up the entire photo. However, without realizing it, her fingers started to zoom in on the part of the picture where she and Deku appeared. Her heart beat a little faster as she observed how they looked together. Deku was smiling with that warm and genuine smile. "It's a good picture," she thought out loud, not realizing that her eyes were beginning to shine a bit brighter as she gazed at the image. "Hey, man, why are you so pissed?" Kirishima asked, struggling to keep up with Bakugo's furious pace as they moved away from the gaming area of the shopping mall. The music and flashing lights were left behind, and the intensity on Bakugo's face seemed to draw all attention around him. "Damn it," Bakugo spat, not slowing down. "Can't a guy just play in peace without getting confessed to? I'm sick of all these declarations." Kirishima barely contained a laugh. He knew that with Bakugo's explosive personality and intimidating demeanor, he attracted many. But he never imagined he'd also get so many love confessions. To Kirishima, the idea of Bakugo being seen as a potential romantic interest was as strange as it was hilarious. "Hey, a lot of people would kill for your luck, you know that?" he remarked, trying to lighten the situation with a smile. Bakugo stopped abruptly, causing Kirishima to almost bump into him. The redhead barely managed to stop in time, blinking in surprise. "Hey," Kirishima exclaimed, but his voice trailed off when he saw where Bakugo was looking. A boy in a red tracksuit was running toward the stores. "I know what'll put me in a good mood. Beating up a nerd always cheers me up," Bakugo said with determination as he marched forward. "Hey, don't take it out on some innocent guy." Kirishima chased after him again, worried about what might happen. Uraraka was watching her reflection in the fountain water when suddenly a shadow approached her from behind. Startled, Uraraka turned around quickly, expecting to see Deku. Instead, she found a young man in a black hoodie and red shoes, his face partially covered by the hood. Through the shadow cast by his hood, she noticed scars crossing his pale skin, sending a shiver down her spine. As she tried to stand up, Uraraka accidentally dropped her phone on the ground. The device hit the edge of the fountain before falling onto the pavement, the screen briefly showing the photo she had been looking at. Elsewhere in the mall, Bakugo was frowning as he looked around, clearly irritated. "Where the hell is he?" he growled, clenching his fists in frustration. "Hey, did you forget your injection today or what's going on?" Kirishima asked, gently pulling on his friend's arm to calm him down. "Ha! As if that crap could stop me," Bakugo scoffed, shaking off Kirishima's grip. "I'll admit it caused some issues at first, but I'm back to normal." Kirishima looked at him incredulously. "You're telling me that they gave you a substance specifically designed to lower your testosterone, and your body still produced in excess?" Kirishima said, impressed. "Do you know that's the most manly thing I've ever heard?" Bakugo let out a satisfied snort, but just then, he spotted Deku running down the opposite corridor. "There you are," Bakugo said with a fierce grin, charging after him. "Wait," Kirishima shouted, following closely. "Are you going to make me chase you all day?" Midoriya almost reached the mall's fountain before he had to take a moment to assess what was happening a few meters ahead. He saw Uraraka, as he had asked, sitting by the fountain. But next to her, a man in a dark hood was handing back the phone she had dropped. Something about the way the man was behaving, scratching his neck insistently and mumbling something, made Deku feel that something was off. "Deku!" 𝐀𝐦 suddenly yelled, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt. Though it caught him by surprise, Izuku made sure not to take his eyes off what was happening at the fountain. "Just leave him alone," He's not to blame for your excess testosterone, Kirishima protested, finally catching up with them. Will you shut up? Bakugo shouted, but Deku barely heard him. His attention remained fixed on Uraraka and the suspicious man. He watched as the stranger placed a hand on Uraraka's shoulder, his long, thin fingers moving in the air. Deku's stomach tightened. Yesterday you said you thought I stopped beating you because you thought the gap between us had widened and you're not on my level anymore. But today you're in luck, Bakugo said, lifting Deku up, taking advantage of the slight height difference. I'll let you prove yourself. You and me here, no quirks. This is not a good time, 𝐀𝐦. Deku responded, his teeth clenched with tension. He wanted to get to Uraraka as soon as possible. She looked uncomfortable, increasingly nervous. See? You're a coward. Bakugo lifted him a bit higher, his fist ready to strike. Deku's patience snapped when he saw the strange man place 4 fingers on Uraraka's neck. Deku gritted his teeth hard and, letting go of his shopping bag, the soccer ball rolled away. I'm not going to let you use me as your punching bag anymore, 𝐀𝐦. Never again, he said, delivering a flying kick directly to Bakugo's side, managing to free himself and throw Bakugo to the ground. As he tried to get up as quickly as possible, the first thing Deku saw was the soccer ball. Hey you! Get your dirty hands off her! The hooded man, Shigaraki, had only a second to see a ball coming towards his face with great force. Removing his hand from the girl's neck, he put his 5 fingers up in front of him. The ball disintegrated instantly, turning to dust before everyone's astonished eyes. Uraraka gasped, retreating reflexively. The fear in her eyes was palpable. Those fingers had been on her neck just moments ago. Deku wasted no time. He ran to Uraraka, grabbing her by the waist and quickly pulling her out of Shigaraki's reach. A distraction Shigaraki realized, standing up and hiding his hands in his pants pockets. What the hell was that? Kirishima asked from a distance. Bakugo, still on the ground, was holding his sore side, watching the scene with a mix of rage and surprise. A small distraction was all Shigaraki needed. Taking advantage of the confusion, he quickly vanished into the crowd of the shopping mall, disappearing among the busy aisles. Midoriya and Uraraka exited the police station as the sky had darkened. The city lights were beginning to come on, and a gentle night breeze ruffled their hair. The tension from the day was still present, but there was a sense of relief at finally leaving that place. Their footsteps echoed on the pavement as they walked toward the exit, closely followed by Bakugo and Kirishima. Once the 4 of them were outside, Bakugo shot a furious glare at Deku, his eyes reflecting the fire of his pent-up frustration. 𝐀𝐦. Sorry about earlier. It's just that Deku started, his voice unsure but sincere. Bakugo interrupted with a growl. Don't apologize, he snapped, fists clenched. Because I'm going to get you back 1,000 times. Is that clear? Instead of backing down, Deku met his gaze with a challenging smile. We'll see about that. He accepted the challenge, determination shining in his green eyes. Stop smiling. It makes me sick. Bakugo grumbled, clearly irritated. I'm sorry. Kirishima approached Uraraka with a friendly smile on his face. I know you've been asked this a lot already, but are you okay? He asked, his tone full of genuine concern. Uraraka nodded with a reassuring smile. Yes, if it weren't for Deku, I might not be here anymore, she admitted, her voice firm but with a hint of gratitude. Kirishima laughed, relieved. That shot was amazing, he exclaimed, giving Deku a friendly pat on the back. You can tell you've been practicing. We should all get together to play sometime. Deku nodded enthusiastically, his smile brightening his face. Sure, he replied, his spirits lifting at the thought of a brighter and more fun future with friends. The kick you gave Bakugo was great too, Kirishima said, placing a hand on the blonde's shoulder, which Bakugo immediately shrugged off. I met this troublemaker in a hero induction course. Best Jeanist himself asked me to keep him on the right path, and that's what I'm trying to do. You talk too much, Bakugo growled, starting to walk toward the station. Oh, by the way, sorry that your date got ruined like that in the end. Well, see you later, Kirishima said, going after Bakugo. Deku and Uraraka looked at each other, a bit embarrassed. They both glanced down at the ground, their faces slightly flushed. There was something about the way Kirishima had mentioned date that made them feel an uncomfortable yet pleasant tickle. That's right, Deku said, pulling a box from the bag he was carrying. With everything that happened, I almost forgot to give you this. I hope you like it. Uraraka looked at him in surprise, her eyes shining under the streetlights. Huh? Why? "Oh, I feel bad. I didn't get you anything," she said, embarrassed as she carefully took the gift. Deku quickly shook his head, trying to reassure her. "I wanted to thank you properly for saving me the day we met. For a while, I didn't have the strength to do things right. But I want to change that from now on," he explained, bowing his head in a sincere bow. "Thank you so much, 𝐬𝐬 𝐍𝐴." She smiled brightly, touched by Deku's words, and raised her fist. "Today you saved me, so there's nothing to thank. But let's promise to keep looking out for each other." Deku smiled, slightly blushing, and responded to 𝐬𝐬's gesture, gently bumping his fist against hers. At that moment, their parents came out of the police station, watching them with tenderness from a distance. Deku's mother, 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐴, smiled at the scene, her eyes full of pride and affection. Meanwhile, 𝐬𝐬's parents exchanged a knowing glance, aware that there was something special between the two young people. Under the starry sky, with the city's murmur as a backdrop, Deku and 𝐬𝐬 stayed there, sharing a silent but meaningful moment. The night air was fresh and full of promises, and as they walked toward their respective homes, both felt that, despite everything that had happened, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. "What are you saying, young Midoriya?" Toshinori exclaimed, his voice echoing across the dark and deserted beach. "Did you say you encountered Tamura Shigaraki?" Deku stopped pulling the huge piece of scrap metal he was dragging toward the shore, letting out a long sigh as he wiped the sweat off his forehead with his forearm. The city lights sparkled in the distance, reflecting on the water's surface, creating an almost ironic contrast with the gravity of the conversation they had just begun. "Have you heard of him?" Midoriya asked, looking at Toshinori with curiosity. Before Toshinori could respond, Todoroki stepped between them, carrying a metal box that seemed heavier than anything Midoriya had lifted that night. "He was a close collaborator of 𝐴ll-For-One," said Todoroki, his voice firm but restrained. "I heard my father talk about him several times. Apparently, he has a terrible power." "Yes," Midoriya affirmed, shivering as he recalled how Shigaraki had disintegrated the ball with just a touch right in front of them. "It's definitely a terrifying quirk. It makes me think it's better to have been born without any quirk than to have to be careful not to touch things and destroy them." Todoroki glanced at one of his hands, his fingers tensing slightly. "And what was he trying to achieve by attacking the young lady?" Toshinori asked. Midoriya continued pulling the scrap metal with the ropes while keeping up the conversation. Perhaps it was his way of relieving the stress caused by recalling how 𝐬𝐬 had been in danger because of him. Shigaraki confessed to her that he was the one responsible for destroying the bridge built by her father's company, and that he was upset because 𝐬𝐬 got in his way, saving that car. And did he tell her what he intended by attacking the car? He didn't say. But he did tell her something very strange before Izuku recalled, when he saw Shigaraki handing the cell phone to 𝐬𝐬. He probably thought 𝐬𝐬 wouldn't survive their encounter, and that's why he told her that a long time ago. He also had people he truly cared about, and remembering that caused him great distress. Toshinori remained silent, frowning in thought for a long time. Could he be referring to his family? Toshinori knew, from his own investigation, that Shigaraki was the grandson of his mentor, Nana Shimura. 𝐴ll-For-One had used that information in their last battle to try and distract him. However, until now, Shigaraki had never shown any interest in thinking about his origins. Could it be that, now that he was no longer under the direct influence of 𝐴ll-For-One, something in him had changed? "I apologize for interrupting your thoughts," Todoroki said, standing in front of him, "but I'd like to know how it went with my father." Toshinori smiled ironically, raising a hand to show his burnt tie before tossing it into the scrap metal. "He's definitely not happy," he said with a mocking tone. "Especially when I told him I wouldn't tell him where you were. But in the end, he understood that he hasn't been doing things right." Then, with a calm movement, he pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Todoroki. "He asked me to give you this." Todoroki's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "I don't want to hear his excuses," he murmured, looking away to the side. "This is from your mother," Toshinori added softly. Himiko Toga skipped along a dark, deserted street. The dim light from the street lamps barely illuminated her steps, and the nighttime breeze played with the strands of her blonde hair. The city was quiet, enveloped in a calm that contrasted sharply with Toga's effervescent energy. As she moved forward, her curious eyes explored every corner, searching for something to break the monotony of the night. Passing by an electronics store, something immediately caught her attention. On one of the lit screens, A familiar face appeared, one she hadn't seen in a long time. Toga hurried over, almost pressing her face against the glass of the display, with a broad and excited smile. "𝐻𝐚𝐭!" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with a mix of surprise and excitement. On the news, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 𝐬𝐸 appeared with a worried expression. Beside her, a boy was talking to the press, his words inaudible to Toga through the glass. But the protective gesture of his posture was unmistakable. At one point, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 and the boy looked at each other, and they both smiled, a shared smile that radiated a special connection. "What?" Toga placed her hands on her cheeks, her excitement growing with each passing second. "That boy looks so much like my first crush from high school," she reminisced with a sigh. "Not that I care now," she giggled. "But it seems like we have similar tastes after all." She continued staring at the screen, her eyes fixed on the image of 𝐻𝐚𝐭 and the boy together. A small spark of something unknown, a mix of jealousy and fascination, flashed through her mind. It wasn't exactly envy she felt. It was more of a twisted recognition. As if, in some distorted way, she understood what she was seeing. Finally, Himiko turned away from the display, her back to the television. Her hands came together in front of her chest, clenched with excitement. Thoughts raced wildly in her head, mixing past memories with present desires. "Maybe now you can understand how I felt back then, 𝐻𝐚𝐭," she murmured to herself, her smile widening even further, almost to the point of becoming a dangerous grin. "Wow, it's a pink shirt!" exclaimed 𝐬𝐸 excitedly as she pulled the gift from the box, her eyes shining with special delight. The delicate fabric of the shirt felt soft between her fingers, and its pink color was perfect, not too bright or too muted, just the shade she liked. She smiled with joy, imagining Deku carefully choosing the gift with her in mind. Without waiting another moment, she quickly tried it on in front of the mirror in her room. The fabric slid over her skin with a pleasant lightness, and she noticed how well the shirt accentuated her figure. She turned from side to side, inspecting how it fit from every angle, and couldn't help but feel charmed by how well it looked from behind too. "It's so cute, just like Deku," she said aloud, smiling without realizing. But as soon as the words left her lips, reality hit her. She froze, the heat rising rapidly to her face as a wave of embarrassment washed over her. Had she really just said that out loud? Even though she was alone in her room, the feeling of having confessed such a personal thought made her feel exposed. "What am I saying?" she murmured, blushing even more. She placed her hands on her cheeks, trying to calm the burning flush on her skin. Feeling embarrassed, she carefully hung the new shirt on her hanger, as if it were a delicate treasure that needed to be protected. "I'd better go to sleep," she decided, trying to convince herself that sleep would be enough to erase the embarrassing moment. "It's been a long day, and I'm not thinking clearly." She quickly turned off the light, the darkness wrapping her in a cloak of calm. She lay down on her bed, tucking herself under the covers up to her head, as if hiding beneath them could conceal her thoughts. But even under the blankets, her nervous smile remained. She tried to breathe deeply, repeating to herself that everything was normal. But why did she feel that warmth in her chest every time she thought about him? Why did the idea of him choosing a shirt specifically for her make her feel so happy? As she struggled with her thoughts, fatigue finally began to take over. The weight of a long, emotional day slowly led her into restless sleep. Yet even in her dreams, Deku's image lingered, his smile still shining in her mind, and the pink shirt he had given her floating at the edge of her subconscious, like a symbol of something deeper that she wasn't ready to accept just yet. "Deku." Deku sneezed, lying on the extra futon in his room. "Are you catching a cold?" Todoroki asked from the bed, and Deku shook his head. "No, just a sneeze," he replied, readjusting himself under the blankets. After a moment of silence, he gathered the courage to ask something that had been on his mind all night. "Sorry, if you don't mind me asking, have you thought about what you're going to do regarding your father?" Todoroki was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the dark ceiling of the room, as if searching for answers among the shadows cast by the faint moonlight. "I haven't made a definitive decision yet," Todoroki began calmly, though there was a latent tension in his words. "The root of it all is that my father wanted to create a successor who could surpass All Might at any cost. That's why he married my mother, hoping that the combination of quirks would make the user someone extraordinarily powerful." Deku nodded, contemplating what was being said. It was incredible to imagine someone being born with two quirks, both potentially very powerful. "Two quirks," he repeated, absorbed in how amazing that sounded from a superficial perspective. Todoroki's face tightened slightly, his expression showing contained anger. No matter how you look at it, it's immoral to have used his status to arrange a marriage for that purpose, Todoroki said firmly. That's why I don't want to become my father's puppet using his damn quirk. Deku listened intently, feeling a deep empathy for his friend's dilemma. He wanted to ask more, but wasn't sure how to address the topic without seeming insensitive. Still, he ventured, "And what does your mother think about this?" The room filled with an uncomfortable silence. Todoroki looked away for a moment, as if recalling something painful. "My mother was admitted to a mental hospital when I was still young," he finally said, touching the scar on his face. "She did this to me, throwing boiling water at me because I looked too much like my father." Deku looked at him in shock and disbelief. He knew Todoroki didn't have an easy relationship with his family, but hearing that was something entirely different. "I'm sorry, Todoroki. I didn't know." Todoroki interrupted him with a sigh, as if he didn't want to stop there. "My mother's mental state deteriorated after the death of my older brother, Toya, who died burned by the fire he created himself, trying to gain my father's recognition." Deku was left speechless. It was too much information, each revelation more painful than the last. The image of Todoroki as the perfect son, created to be a tool of revenge and pride, was crumbling before his eyes, replaced by a more human and painful one. "That's why, if I could get rid of my father's fire power, I would do it without a second thought," Todoroki continued, with a calm resolve, though his eyes shone with an intensity that showed his desire for liberation. Deku frowned, considering his words. "That's what 𝐴ll4𝐴 used to do," Deku said finally, in a serious voice. He promised people who wanted to get rid of their quirks that he would free them from them. And in turn, he promised those who were born without quirks, like me, that he would grant them a quirk. That's why he gained so many followers in a short time. However, he began to hoard the best quirks for himself, and became extremely powerful, Todoroki continued, frowning. "In that aspect, because of his ambition for power, he reminds me of my father." Deku nodded slowly, seeing the parallel. "Mr. Yagi told me that Tamura Shigaraki, the person who attacked my friend Uraraka, had a similar father-son relationship with 𝐴ll4𝐴. But when he realized that 𝐴ll4𝐴 wanted to use him, Shigaraki abandoned him," Deku recalled, reflecting aloud. "Seeing it that way, I think I'm fortunate that my father just left when he found out I didn't have a quirk." It was the first time Deku had made that statement aloud. He had no proof, but he assumed it was the most likely scenario. The absence of his father, an open wound for so long, suddenly seemed to have a more tangible explanation. "Well, at least you get along with your mom," Todoroki pointed out, softening his tone a bit. "In the letter my mother sent me, she says she wants me to visit her, and I'm considering going tomorrow." Deku smiled warmly at him, feeling a wave of relief at his friend's decision. "Then do your best. Everything will work out," Midoriya encouraged sincerely. Todoroki nodded, offering a slight smile. It was a small gesture, but for Deku, it was a sign that perhaps his friend was beginning to find a way to heal the wounds of his past. It was a new day, one of those days when the fresh air and bright sun seemed full of promise. The cherry blossoms decorated the landscape with their delicate pink petals slowly falling with the breeze. Uraraka stood under one of those trees, waiting patiently after school. The sun filtered through the branches, casting small rays of light that forced her to shield her eyes with her hand. "Uraraka." A familiar voice called out, making her turn immediately. She was delighted to see Deku running up the hill toward her. His face was full of enthusiasm, though it was clear he had run with all his might not to be too late. When he reached her side, Deku bent forward, placing his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. His cheeks were flushed, not just from the physical effort, but also, Uraraka thought, from the excitement of seeing her. "Sorry for making you wait," he said, still breathing heavily. "Kaken tried to fight me again, but I managed to dodge him." Uraraka smiled, shaking her head to dismiss his lateness. She enjoyed seeing Deku like this, so full of energy and always willing to do his best, even in situations that others might find frustrating or annoying. As he caught his breath, she couldn't help but notice how adorable he looked with his cheeks flushed from the run. The sun kept climbing higher, and its rays grew more intense. Uraraka squinted and covered her eyes a bit more with her hand. Deku, noticing her discomfort, glanced around, searching for a solution. "We should get some ice cream from that stand over there," he suggested, pointing to a small cart shaded by another cherry blossom tree further ahead. Uraraka blinked in surprise. She was sure that stand hadn't been there a moment ago. How had she not noticed it before? But she didn't dwell on it, and nodded eagerly. "Great idea," she replied, feeling instant relief at the thought of a cold ice cream on such a hot day. Deku eagerly ran ahead toward the ice cream cart. She watched him talk to someone inside the small stand, gesturing as he spoke. But after a few moments, he returned empty-handed, with a slightly disappointed expression. "They said the ice cream machine broke down," he announced apologetically. "Oh, that happens a lot," 𝗂𝗧𝗏 said, trying to cheer him up. "I think it's even become a joke on the internet." Deku chuckled softly at her comment, shaking his head. Then his face lit up as if a brilliant idea had just crossed his mind. "I know," he said excitedly. "I know what would be even better than ice cream in this heat." 𝗂𝗧𝗏 looked at him, curious to know what his new idea was. Deku approached her with a sweet smile that made her heart beat a little faster. But what he did next left her completely bewildered. Deku took one of her hands, gently pulling it toward him. His expression changed dramatically. From the sweet and cheerful smile she knew so well to an intense, focused look, maybe even a little provocative. "You, 𝗂𝗧𝗏," he whispered, and without warning, he kissed the inside of her wrist, his warm breath sending a shiver down her spine. Before she could react, Deku slowly ran his tongue over the skin where he had kissed, leaving a trail of warmth that made her whole body tense with surprise. A shiver ran down her spine, and 𝗂𝗧𝗏 felt a chill that made her skin prickle. "Deku," she murmured, not knowing what to think, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Suddenly, everything vanished. 𝗂𝗧𝗏's eyes flew open, startled, and she found herself staring at the ceiling of her room. Her breathing was quick, her heart was pounding, and her face was completely flushed. She felt the heat in her cheeks as she covered her face with her hands, embarrassed. "Why did I dream something like that?" she asked herself quietly, her voice a trembling whisper. She turned over in bed, trying to calm down, but the sensations from the dream still lingered, as if Deku had really been there, so close to her. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her wrist, and the intensity of his gaze. It was 4 a.m., and All Might was wide awake in the darkness of his room. His mind couldn't find any peace. There were too many worries, too many thoughts circling around his head, making it impossible to sleep. Shigaraki and his unclear intentions were at the forefront of his mind. But what truly haunted him was the persistent feeling that even though All for One was dead, his influence still lingered over all this chaos. 4 years ago, it had all started with an operation that was supposed to be kept secret, a carefully planned move with a small team to avoid leaks to the media. Alongside him were 𝗵𝗃, Best Jeanist, Eraserhead, and the Rookie of the Year, 𝐻𝐸x. Despite his young age, 𝐻𝐸x had proven to be exceptional. His role as a double agent had been crucial. With his ability to infiltrate, he had managed to pose as a young prospect of an all-for-one follower, thus uncovering the villain's base of operations. All Might vividly remembered the day they had stormed that base. The damp, dark walls, the narrow corridors filled with echoes of a dark past. As they moved deeper, they had found the remains of a grotesque laboratory. It was there that the records revealed the most abominable truth. Those monsters All for One had created, those beings in their early stages of development, had once been people. People who had once had dreams, hopes, and families. The villain had turned them into tools for his own ambition. Even now, years later, All Might felt an indescribable fury, remembering how All for One had manipulated his own followers, exploiting their deepest desires for his own gain. That man had been a master at preying on human yearnings and despairs, at twisting the noblest aspirations into weapons of destruction. And that was something All Might could never forgive him for. When the time finally came to face him, All Might had not hesitated to use all his power. He remembered how every blow reverberated through his body, how fury and justice intertwined in every movement. He had fought with everything he had, with every fiber of his being, and when the dust settled, All for One was dead. But victory came at a cost. He himself had been gravely wounded, a price he was willing to pay to stop the villain once and for all. Now, as his thoughts drifted through those dark memories, his phone vibrated on the bedside table, pulling him out of his reverie. It was a news alert followed by a text message that, despite the hour, prompted him to get up. "Are you sure you don't want us to come with you?" Midoriya asked, his voice filled with concern as he stood in front of the entrance to the apartment building where he lived. Todoroki, staring at the ground for a moment, shook his head gently. "I think it's something I need to do on my own," he replied firmly. Midoriya nodded, understanding. He knew how important it was for Todoroki to face his past and his family, especially after everything that had happened. "All right. Text me if you need anything. My mom and I are going out for a run since Mr. Yagi had something to take care of. But I'll keep my phone on at all times," Midoriya said, trying to offer him all the support he could. A few steps behind them, Midoriya's mother, 𝐀𝐦, was already doing warm-up exercises, stretching her arms and legs with a serene smile on her face. Todoroki took a moment, as if carefully considering his words. Then, with a seriousness that was so characteristic of him, he said, "I never thanked you for what you've done for me, Midoriya." His eyes met Midoriya's. There was a brief silence before he continued. "But since I don't want to seem as cold as my father, I'll say that. I feel like you're the first friend I've ever had." Todoroki's words hung in the air, filled with a depth of sincerity that left Midoriya speechless for a moment. 𝐀𝐦, who had been listening from a distance, couldn't help but feel a wave of emotion. Her eyes filled with tears, moved by Todoroki's honesty and the bond her son had formed with him. "Todoroki," Midoriya began, but he stopped, unsure of what to say. Instead, he offered a warm smile, one that radiated support and understanding. "I'm glad to hear that. And I'm really lucky to have you as a friend, too." Todoroki scratched his chin slightly, a small, unconsciously nervous gesture he made when he wasn't sure how to express his feelings. "I should go," he finally said, straightening up and adjusting his backpack on his shoulder. "We'll see each other after school," Midoriya called out with a wide smile, raising his hand in a wave. Uraraka patted her cheeks lightly, trying to shake off the drowsiness that still lingered after not being able to fall back asleep. The dream from the previous night still haunted her, leaving her confused. Her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment, that strange dream where Deku had been so bold. The image of him kissing her wrist and the sensation of his skin against hers made her blush just thinking about it. She stopped on the train platform, gazing toward the tracks as the morning sun began to rise in the sky, bathing the city in a soft, golden light. Uraraka just wished the train would arrive soon so she could get to school and maybe find a moment to rest before classes began. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice that pulled her out of her thoughts. "Uraraka." Deku was running toward her along the platform, his breath a little heavy, but a smile on his face. "Ah, Deku," Uraraka exclaimed in surprise, her eyes widening. "I didn't know you took this train line." She pinched her cheek lightly, making sure this wasn't another strange dream. The sensation was real, so this Deku wasn't an illusion. Deku scratched his head, looking a bit embarrassed. "Usually, I don't," he explained, "but I went for a run with my mom and finished earlier than expected. I decided to take a different route and get some training in at the school gym before classes." Uraraka nodded, feeling her heart beat a little faster than usual at the sight of him. She tried to ignore the feeling and forced a smile. At that moment, the train arrived, and due to rush hour, a wave of office workers and students pushed both of them into the train car. Before they could react, they were together, pressed against the window on the other side of the car. The space was tight, and their bodies were almost touching. Uraraka could feel the warmth of Deku's body next to hers, and her face blushed even more. "Looks like it's rush hour for office workers," Uraraka commented, trying to ease the awkwardness of the moment with a nervous laugh. "Why, yeah," Deku responded, his face also flushed as he tried to turn his head away from her. But it was impossible to ignore how close she was. "I can smell her shampoo, and it smells so nice," he thought, feeling his heart pounding. As they both tried to find a more comfortable position, the voices of two young women, sitting further up in the car, caught their attention. "Look. They say he'll be the new symbol of peace when All Might retires," one of the women said excitedly. "His name is Mirio Tagata, and he's in his second year in the hero course at UA, the other replied, showing a photo on her phone to her friend. "He's so handsome. Maybe if I were 15 years younger." The first woman joked, laughing. "You sound like a total creep." The other woman laughed, causing a burst of laughter between the two. Hearing the conversation, Uraraka looked at Deku and noticed his expression had changed. His gaze seemed distant, as if he had fallen into deep thought. She had already noticed that sometimes, when All Might was mentioned, Deku became contemplative. Without thinking much, Uraraka touched his arm, trying to snap him out of his reverie. "Deku," she murmured softly, but when her fingers lightly pressed against the muscle of his arm, she couldn't help but be surprised by how firm it felt. "Hard," she whispered involuntarily, her eyes widening as she realized what she had just said. Huh? Deku blinked, coming back to himself and looking at her in confusion. Uraraka's face turned as red as a tomato. I'm getting off here," she suddenly exclaimed, pushing forward and making her way through the crowd, trying to escape the embarrassment she felt. "But this isn't your station," Deku shouted, worried, trying to keep his eyes on her as she hurried off the train. Once outside, Uraraka put her hands on her face, fanning herself in a desperate attempt to cool down her burning cheeks. The train pulled away, and she took deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. "What's happening to me?" she asked herself quietly, looking toward the train that was moving away, still feeling the warmth of Deku's body against hers and the firmness of his arm under her hand. The images from the dream came back to her mind, and although she tried to push them away, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of excitement and embarrassment that she couldn't quite understand. Meanwhile, inside the train, Deku looked at the door Uraraka had exited through, feeling a little lost. He didn't understand what had happened, but he knew that the expression on her face, just before getting off, was something he had never seen in her before. Part of him wanted to run after her, to make sure she was okay, but another part was frozen, thinking about how strange it all had been. When Todoroki reached the corridor of the clinic where his mother's room was, his steps slowed, almost faltering. But he summoned the courage to continue. However, as he turned the corner, his expression hardened upon seeing his father standing there, dressed in civilian clothes, waiting by the closed door of the room. By reflex, Todoroki frowned, the tension in his shoulders increasing. "I didn't come here to see you," he stated firmly as he reached the door. "I know," replied 𝗵𝗃, his voice low but clear. "But I want us to talk." "Shoto." 𝗵𝗃 extended a hand, stopping Todoroki's before he could turn the door handle. "About what?" "About how to continue your training plan, so I can accomplish what you couldn't," he retorted with a biting tone. 𝗵𝗃, instead of responding with anger or defensiveness, simply held out an envelope. Todoroki eyed it suspiciously before taking it and pulling out its contents. To his surprise, the envelope contained a document with a photo of a condominium and the deed to the property. "If you want to go live with your mother, I won't stop you," 𝗵𝗃 said, his gaze shifting away, avoiding his son's eyes. "You two can live away from me if that's what you want. Your brother will be leaving for college soon, and your sister is about to get married. I wouldn't want to force you to live alone with me." Todoroki stared at the papers in his hands, feeling stunned. The offer was unexpected, a kind of truce, but the anger he had always felt toward his father did not dissipate. He could still feel the weight of every shout, every hit, every moment his mother had suffered because of this man. His hand clenched into a fist, crumpling the deed. "This doesn't even begin to make up for half of what you've done," he spat, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "And by the way, I still haven't heard you apologize." 𝗵𝗃 looked at him, his expression darkened by a mix of regret and stubbornness. "Shoto." "Not to me," Todoroki shouted, his voice filling the hallway with an intensity that echoed. "To my mother." At that moment, the door to the room opened, and a nurse wearing a mask came out, pushing a wheelchair with his mother, Mrs. Todoroki, seemingly unconscious. "Could you be more considerate of the patients?" the nurse complained firmly, looking at both men with disapproval. "Mom." Todoroki quickly leaned down beside the wheelchair, trying to reach for her hand. "She's just sedated," the nurse explained, his tone softer. "Just moments before you arrived, she felt overwhelmed knowing her son was coming to see her, and we had to sedate her to calm her down. Now, I think it was for the best." The nurse moved between Todoroki and his father, carefully pushing the wheelchair. As he did, Todoroki felt something strange. Something in the way the nurse looked at his father. Something was not right. "Don't worry. Maybe when you manage to resolve your issues, you can visit her again," the nurse said, probably smiling under his mask as he continued down the hall. Suddenly, Todoroki felt as if everything was moving in slow motion. His mother was being taken away, the sound of the wheelchair wheels echoing on the linoleum floor. He could see the silver shine of her white hair under the hallway lights. Something was off, but he couldn't quite understand what it was. "Wait!" Todoroki shouted suddenly, driven by an instinct he couldn't explain. He ran after the nurse, his heart pounding in his chest. He quickly turned the corner of the hallway, hoping to catch up to them, but to his shock and horror, the wheelchair and his mother were gone. Izuku walked through the bustling streets of the city, a slight smile lighting up his face as he looked at his phone. He had just received a message from Uraraka, And although he had initially been worried when she rushed off the train, he now felt relieved. "I forgot I was meeting a friend, so I got off the train earlier," the message read. "Don't worry, Deku, I'm fine." Izuku couldn't help but chuckle softly. For a moment, he had thought that maybe Uraraka had felt uncomfortable about something. Maybe because he still smelled of sweat after his morning jog, or perhaps because of their closeness in the crowded train car. However, it was comforting to know it had just been a sudden change of plans. He pocketed his phone and continued on his way to school, letting his thoughts wander. Suddenly, a notification popped up on his phone screen. It was news. Curious, Izuku decided to open it. As he read the headline, his expression shifted to one of surprise and uncertainty. 𝐴𝐸, the future symbol of peace. This was the article the women on the train had been talking about earlier. The title echoed in his mind, stirring a whirlwind of emotions. Unable to help himself, he began reading the article as he walked. As he absorbed the words, a sense of unease grew in his chest. The news detailed the impressive achievements of Mirio Takada, a second-year student at UA Academy. The agency where Takada was interning highlighted the countless successes he had achieved, even surpassing many professional heroes in his short career. His quirk, permeation, allowed him to pass through any object, a skill he used with impeccably trained physical prowess. The article concluded with an ambitious statement. Takada aimed to rescue 1,000,000 people, hence his hero name, 𝐴𝐸. Izuku looked at a photo of Mirio included in the article. There was something about his smile, his confident posture, that reminded him of All Might. It wasn't just his physical appearance, but the same aura of hope and determination that All Might exuded. As he approached the entrance to the school, Izuku was still lost in thought. The sound of something slamming against the metal fences of the soccer field snapped him out of his thoughts. Izuku blinked, realizing he had arrived at the fields without even noticing. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. There was 𝐀𝐦, kicking a soccer ball with a ferocity that Izuku recognized instantly. 𝐵AKUGO was furious, almost rabid. He was slamming the ball against the fence with such force that it seemed like it might break at any moment. Izuku watched him for a moment longer. He could see the frustration in his movements, the same feeling he was trying to suppress. For a brief instant, 𝐵AKUGO looked away. But realizing he was being watched, his expression hardened even more. "What the hell are you looking at, you idiot?" 𝐵AKUGO shouted, his tone biting. Without responding, Izuku dropped his backpack and began to walk toward the field, his steps steady. "Nobody invited you," 𝐵AKUGO yelled, his anger evident. "So get lost." But Izuku wasn't intimidated. He ignored 𝐵AKUGO's words and, without thinking too much about it, ran toward the ball and kicked it with all his might. The impact was liberating, a burst of pent-up emotions released in that single kick. The ball bounced off the fence and rolled back toward them. "Are you deaf or something?" 𝐵AKUGO exclaimed, clearly irritated. "Did you read the article too, 𝐀𝐦?" Izuku asked calmly as he watched the ball roll back. 𝐵AKUGO trapped the ball with his foot and kicked it again, this time with even more force. "That dumbass doesn't even come close to All Might." 𝐵AKUGO spat, his rage evident in every word. To 𝐵AKUGO's surprise, stupid Deku didn't try to defend him, and instead just kicked the ball again. Each strike seemed to ease the tension they both felt a little. "Do you think All Might will really choose him as his successor?" Izuku asked, his voice lower, almost a whisper, as he watched the ball fly toward the fence once more. "If he does, I'll kill him," 𝐵AKUGO shouted, kicking the ball even harder than before. Izuku gave a small smile. Despite everything, there was something comforting in knowing he wasn't the only one feeling this way. "I was surprised you agreed to meet with me," Sir 𝐼𝐸 commented, adjusting his glasses with a precise, measured motion. His voice was calm, but his eyes spoke volumes. He had been anticipating this meeting for a long time. All Might did not respond immediately. Instead, he took out his phone and placed it on the table, showing a headline that seemed to have followed him throughout the day, like a persistent shadow. "Well, you weren't very subtle in your intentions," All Might replied, frowning. The headline on his phone read, "Who will be the successor of the symbol of peace?" 𝐼𝐸 remained composed, but his fingers tensed slightly on the table. "I didn't leave you many options, All Might. You've been ignoring my requests to introduce me to 𝐴𝐸," 𝐼𝐸 continued, straightforwardly. All Might let out a sigh, his gaze falling momentarily to the coffee in his cup before he answered. "I'll meet him when he starts teaching at UA next semester. There's no need to rush." 𝐼𝐸 remained unfazed. I think there is a need. You see, Mirio developed his quirk, which was initially a flaw, and turned it into his greatest strength. His physical prowess is entirely natural, a result of relentless hard work. Furthermore, his charisma is undeniable. He inspires others just by being present. All Might nodded, considering his old colleague's words. He had heard about 𝗀𝐻𝐻 and his exceptional potential, both as a hero and a symbol of hope. Undoubtedly, he could become a great symbol of peace, All Might mused aloud. A spark of triumph briefly flickered in 𝗀𝐻𝐻's eyes. I knew that. But maybe he has already accomplished too much on his own. All Might interrupted, keeping his gaze fixed on 𝗀𝐻𝐻, who looked puzzled for a moment. It's undeniable that young 𝗀𝐻𝐻 has made a name for himself, and that's more than admirable. But my power, one for all, is a power that must be nurtured, and then passed on like a torch. With young 𝗀𝐻𝐻, I feel that, rather than passing on a torch, it would be like fueling a fire that's already burning. A sort of power-up, if you will. 𝗀𝐻𝐻 did not respond immediately. His glasses gleamed with a light that concealed his true thoughts. I'm not saying I've ruled him out, but my initial impression is that he doesn't need to be my successor, given that he's already a hero in his own right. All Might continued, with a softer but firm tone. 𝗀𝐻𝐻 continued to watch All Might without showing any emotion. That was well rehearsed, All Might. But you're not fooling me, 𝗀𝐻𝐻 finally said. All Might frowned, a slight gesture of discomfort crossing his face. The only reason you'd dismiss the most logical and sensible option for passing on one for all is if you're expecting something or someone specific. So tell me, what or who is it? The question hung in the air, heavy and inevitable. For a moment, the memory of Hawks, asking almost the same question, flashed fleetingly through All Might's mind. Yes, I am expecting something, All Might finally confessed, his voice low but firm. I've always thought that when I meet the one who should be the successor of One for All, I'll be the first to know. It will be a clear feeling, like the impulse to run when someone is in danger, and you feel your feet moving without thinking. To All Might's surprise, Sir 𝗀𝐻𝐻 smiled. A small but genuine smile. I've always appreciated your sense of humor, All Might. I'm being very serious. Totally foolish and sentimental. That's so like you. But fine, in the end, it's your decision. Just promise me you'll keep an eye on Mirio when you have the chance, 𝗀𝐻𝐻 said, adjusting his glasses again, this time with a more relaxed gesture. All Might nodded, his expression softening. All right, I'll consider it. As Izuku left school, he felt the afternoon sun warming his back gently as he walked toward the main exit. The crowd of students dispersing around him barely took notice of him, each absorbed in their own conversations and plans for after school. Checking his phone, he saw another message from Uraraka that made him stop. I'm going to start taking martial arts classes after school, the message read. It's a free course for women, teaching self-defense principles. Sorry, I won't be able to walk with you to the station from now on. But we'll see each other soon. Izuku read the message twice, feeling a mix of emotions that left him with a strange emptiness in his stomach. At first, the news discouraged him a bit. After all, those small walks to the station had been moments he cherished. A perfect excuse to spend a few more minutes with Uraraka at the end of each day. But he quickly corrected himself, remembering that it was a good thing. Knowing that Uraraka wanted to learn to defend herself, that she was taking steps to protect herself, made him feel a bit proud of her. That's great, he murmured to himself, forcing a smile as he put his phone in his pocket. However, the truth was that he didn't feel like talking much that day, even if Uraraka had been there. As he walked slowly toward the campus exit, Izuku gripped the straps of his backpack tightly. An unknown weight pressed on his chest, and he was ready to admit, even if only to himself, that he was upset about the article he had read that morning. The one claiming that Mirio 𝗀𝐻𝐻 would be All Might's successor. The mere idea gnawed at him from within. Although the article didn't directly mention All Might's opinion, the assumption that someone else, anyone else, could take the place he had dreamed of holding since he was a child made him feel jealous. The word burned in his mind, as if it were something he should be ashamed of. Was that what he felt? Jealousy. Over a position. The crowd around him began to thin out, and suddenly, Izuku remembered what he needed to do to release all the frustration swirling inside him like a storm. Without a second thought, Izuku tightened the straps of his backpack and started running toward the beach. When Uraraka arrived at the place where she would be taking her first martial arts classes, she felt a bit nervous. A group of girls was already sitting in a circle in the center of the room, waiting for the lesson to begin. Some chatted among themselves, while others checked their phones or stretched their limbs. When Uraraka noticed one of the girls waving at her, she felt a small wave of relief. She forced herself to smile, reminding herself that she was there to learn and become stronger. "Hi," she said as she sat next to the girl, trying to sound friendly and confident. "I'm Ochako Uraraka. Hi. You can call me 𝐀𝐦," the girl replied with a relaxed smile, her eyes sparkling with a playful glint. "It looks like you're new to this, but don't be nervous." 𝐀𝐦 had a laid-back attitude that immediately made Uraraka feel a bit more at ease. Her voice was soft but assured, and her green eyes, paired with her blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, gave her a friendly and approachable air. "Thanks. I'll try," Uraraka said, letting out a small sigh of relief. "Have you taken classes before?" "A few," 𝐀𝐦 answered, shrugging casually. "It's just that the streets aren't as safe as they used to be." "Tell me about it," Uraraka said, her voice dropping slightly as her eyes darkened with the memory. "Recently, a stranger grabbed me by the neck and tried to use his quirk on me." "That's terrible," 𝐀𝐦 responded, though her expression remained curiously calm, almost as if she was used to hearing such stories. Uraraka looked at 𝐀𝐦's features more closely. Her fair skin contrasted with her blonde hair, and her figure was slender but athletic, suggesting that she was accustomed to taking care of herself. She must have been through something similar, Ochako thought. It was easy to imagine that, with her striking appearance, 𝐀𝐦 might have been a target of harassment more than once, which might explain her nonchalant attitude toward dangerous situations. Across the circle, another girl watched them silently. She had long green hair and large, round eyes that seemed to observe everything with a calm intensity. Noticing Uraraka's gaze, the girl lowered her eyes shyly, as if she wasn't used to being the center of attention. How cute. She might be a bit shy, like Deku, Uraraka thought, smiling softly. To Midoriya's surprise, Todoroki was already at the beach when he arrived, moving the scrap with an intensity that was unusual for him. The afternoon sun shone on the nearby waves, reflecting off the rusted metal and debris piled along the shore. In the distance, the sound of the sea crashing against the rocks offered a curious contrast to the metallic echo of trash being tossed into the container by Todoroki. Izuku was about to call out to him, but something in Todoroki's posture stopped him. He could see the fury contained in every sharp movement, the clenched jaw, furrowed brows, and that steely gaze fixed on the scrap he was collecting told Midoriya that something must have gone wrong during his visit to the clinic to see his mother. Izuku felt a pang of guilt remembering how he had assured him the day before that everything would be okay, believing his words might offer some comfort. Why is nothing going as planned? He thought, clenching his fists and ready to start working. Todoroki didn't seem to notice his presence as he began moving the heavier scrap, and both continued working tirelessly. All Might walked slowly and thoughtfully toward the beach, feeling the weight of responsibility with each step. True to his word, his attention was fixed on his cell phone screen, where he was reading the latest articles about the young 𝐬𝐸. Each line left him more impressed than the last. Stories of daring rescues, decisive confrontations with villains, and the tireless fighting spirit that 𝐬𝐸 demonstrated time and again. Am I wrong to expect that the successor to One for All will reveal himself to me on his own? He wondered silently, his brow furrowed with concern. The words of Mirai echoed in his mind like a persistent refrain. Was I being too sentimental about this? The hero felt a pang of anxiety, remembering how his coughing up blood had become more frequent in recent months. The pain in his chest was a constant reminder that his time was running out. He needed to fulfill his responsibility, just as his teacher had taught him many years ago. He had to find his successor and pass on the torch before it was too late. With a sigh, All Might placed a hand on his side, where an invisible wound still tormented him. His respiratory system had been damaged after the battle with All for One, and every breath reminded him of the limits of his mortal body. But his mind, his spirit, always refused to yield. He looked up at the beach, expecting to see the familiar scene of scattered scrap he had left Midoriya and Todoroki. However, what he saw took his breath away. The beach, which had been covered in trash and debris for so long, was now completely cleared. All the scrap had vanished, as if it had never been there. All Might blinked, unable to believe what his eyes were seeing. He let the cell phone fall from his hand, dropping it without even realizing it. On two gigantic piles of perfectly stacked metal, he could see the young Midoriya and Todoroki. They stood at the top, shouting with a mix of euphoria and relief. Tears streamed down their faces. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure effort and determination. Impossible. All Might murmured, his eyes wide with astonishment. His voice, barely a whisper, was lost in the wind coming from the sea. The work that would normally take 10 months had been accomplished in just 5. 𝐀𝐦 took a deep breath, enjoying the fresh air gently blowing, filling her lungs and relaxing her senses. They were walking through the park after their first day of martial arts training. The leaves of the trees whispered with the breeze, and the afternoon sun painted the sky with a soft golden hue. A playful smile spread across 𝐀𝐦's face as she turned her head towards Uraraka, her eyes shining with unexpected curiosity. So tell me, Ochako, do you have a boyfriend? 𝐀𝐦 asked suddenly, walking backward with a light tone but filled with interest. Uraraka flinched slightly at the direct question, but quickly tried to mask it with a nervous laugh. No, I don't think I'm ready for that yet, she replied, her voice wavering slightly as she looked away, trying to hide the blush rising on her cheeks. 𝐀𝐦 wasn't easily fooled. She tilted her head with a mischievous smile, and her eyes sparkled even more. But there's someone you like, right? She insisted, her voice soft and tempting as if she were trying to uncover a secret. Unintentionally, Uraraka recalled a fragment of her dream involving Deku, and couldn't help but blush even more. Ah, well, To Uraraka's relief, her friend continued talking. There's someone I like. Uraraka felt relieved that the conversation was shifting away from her and smiled widely, her usual warmth returning. You're so nice and pretty. I'm sure they'll like you back, she said enthusiastically, her voice full of sincere support and optimism. Do you think? 𝐀𝐦 asked, taking Uraraka's hands suddenly. Uraraka nodded in response. And do you think you could lend me something to use when I confess? Surprised by the question, Uraraka nodded. Sure, but I'm not sure if we're the same size. I think you have much more curves than I do, she admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. That doesn't matter, 𝐀𝐦 replied with a smile as she continued walking. I just want it as a good luck charm. Not fully understanding what she meant, Uraraka followed her friend towards the entrance of the train station. Deku woke up to the gentle sound of waves crashing at his feet. He abruptly sat up in the sand and saw Todoroki and Mr. Toshinori in the dimness of the night, apparently waiting for him to wake up. You did a great job, young Midoriya. You exceeded my expectations by a long shot, Mr. Toshinori congratulated him with a proud smile. Izuku lowered his head with a faint smile, still disoriented. The last thing he remembered was shouting over a pile of scrap. Then, extreme exhaustion had made him lose consciousness. Thank you, but I wouldn't have achieved this so quickly without Todoroki's help, he said, looking at his friend, who kept his gaze fixed on the sea. Although we were equal in this today, I believe the credit generally belongs to you, Midoriya, Todoroki said, not taking his eyes off the horizon. Izuku remained silent, unable to fully believe his friend's words, but deeply appreciating his kindness. Also, what I did was more of an act of relief than a desire to strengthen myself as a person, Todoroki admitted seriously. In that case, I'm the same, Midoriya confessed. I did today's work because of the frustration I've accumulated due to things not going as I expected. From not developing a quirk to having to give up my dream of following in All Might's footsteps. Mr. Toshinori clenched his fists tightly as Midoriya spoke, his expression grave. I know that compared to your family issues, this may seem trivial. It's not, Todoroki interrupted. If it's your dream, it's important too. Todoroki's words resonated with Izuku with unexpected force. For a long time, Izuku had thought his own problems were insignificant compared to others. Hearing Todoroki, someone who had faced so much pain and conflict, say that his dreams mattered too, made him break down in tears. No, it's not okay to keep crying all the time. I promised to be stronger so no one would have to worry about me, Izuku said, trying to wipe his eyes. Before he could continue, he felt Mr. Toshinori's arms enveloping him in a warm, protective hug. Even if we don't want to admit it, we all have sentimental aspects about something, Toshinori said softly, his voice full of understanding and affection. He then looked at Todoroki, who was observing silently. And it's okay to cry. Even heroes do it when they need to. Todoroki nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the sea. Thank you, I'll remember that, he said with a firm voice, standing up with determination. But first, I'll make the person who kidnapped my mother pay. Izuku quickly processed Todoroki's words, feeling his friend's determination. He stood up with renewed energy despite his exhaustion. Then I'll help you, Izuku declared, a spark of bravery in his eyes. They looked at each other, a silent and firm understanding passing between them. Uraraka and her new friend were getting off the train when, by chance, Bakugo entered the car, carrying a gym bag and wearing a clearly irritated expression. Uraraka felt a great sense of relief upon noticing that he hadn't seen her, and, therefore, hadn't called her round face. However, suddenly, 𝐀𝐦, with her usual boldness, threw a comment. "Hey, handsome, don't ruin your beautiful face with that frown," 𝐀𝐦 said, walking backward with a playful smile. Uraraka was startled at the thought of a possible explosive reaction from Bakugo. But the door closed behind him, and the train began to move. For a brief moment, Uraraka thought she saw what might have been the hint of a smile on Bakugo's profile. What was it about a boy's smile that made them so charming? Uraraka wondered as she recalled Deku smiling. Deku before he met with Hatsu. Deku laughing in the cafe. And then, unexpectedly, Deku falling from a building, but suddenly that Deku wasn't him, but rather Himiko Toga's first love, and he wasn't falling from just any building, but from the school's roof. She ran and reached out her hand, trying to touch him before he hit the ground. She preferred to try doing something rather than doing nothing and regretting it later, but Uraraka turned away from the scene, only to find the same boy who had just jumped now beside her, with his mouth open in shock, unable to believe he had just witnessed his own death. She woke up, rubbing her eyes, and couldn't help but feel melancholic. "Toga," she whispered quietly, as a sadness filled her chest. Although it was early, Uraraka decided to go for a run to clear her mind. She was following Deku's example, and just that fact made her feel happy and motivated. As the sun began to rise, she arrived at the beach and saw Deku practicing with Mr. Toshinori and a guy who must be Todoroki, whom she had heard about. Not wanting to interrupt, she leaned against the railing, observing intently as they practiced fighting styles. She thought that at certain moments, Deku seemed to glow with the green tones of his eyes and hair against the sunrise. His expression while attacking became unusually fierce and determined. Again, she felt like she was on cloud 9, as if floating with her quirk. Despite the short time they had known each other, she felt like she had seen him in various facets, and seeing him in this new light, she told herself that she also really liked Deku in attack mode. That expression of determination made him look absolutely cool. Without worrying too much about whether she was blushing, she wondered, was this what girls in magazines called attraction? Watching Deku get stronger and stronger. Maybe when she first met him, she was too distracted by his resemblance to the guy who had obsessed Himiko Toga to notice anything else. But now she felt she was seeing Deku at his full potential. Was what she felt admiration? Seeing him grow as a person every day and wanting to be like him? Or affection? For having seen him at his worst, and now seeing him smile again? Or, combining it all, what she really felt was, what if she talked to Deku about this? The mere thought made her anxious, and as she breathed, she felt her breath was warm. But would it be right to tell him about her feelings? She wasn't sure if it was the right time. Now Deku seemed very focused on finding a new path, after giving up on following in All Might's footsteps. And she didn't want that to be lost. His ability to focus, whether as a fanboy who wrote down everything related to heroes in his notebooks, or as someone who practiced non-stop in his free time. She didn't want Deku to change at all. Stepping away from the railing, Uraraka decided to continue running in the opposite direction. From the beach, Deku turned in that direction due to a strange premonition, but found no one. And his distraction earned him a punch to the face from Todoroki. "Don't get distracted, young Midoriya," Mr. Toshinori reprimanded him. "Yes," Deku replied, returning to the training with renewed focus.